across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of Common Sense. Thank you to Duncan Parks. Good to see him again. 3 minutes after 1 o'clock. Let's get cracking. We are, of course, going to continue to pick up on a different angle on the Robert Jenrick defection to reform yesterday afternoon. The news broken live here on Talk, of course. Sacked by Kemi Badenoch in the morning. His stance stated that the Conservative Party is broken and can't be fixed. I'm going to ask you this, the other way round. Can the Tories actually survive? Thoughts on that? Also this afternoon, the defiant West Midlands police chief may have just hours left in the post as calls for his resignation continue. The Mail have certainly reported that Craig Gilbert is expected to quit today over the Maccabee football fans scandal. But will he hold on? So on Wednesday, we said he'd be gone by 4 p.m. He didn't go. On Thursday, we said he'd be gone by 4 p.m. He didn't go. Today is Friday. He will be gone by 4 p.m. Will he go? Find out. We'll bring it to you here live as it happens. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. So here's the thing. Can the Conservative Party, can the Tories survive? It's now just over 24 hours since high-profile Tory Robert Jenrick legged it from the blue side and joined Reform UK. Mr Jenrick said he's as mad as hell and wasn't going to take it anymore. The former Conservative leadership candidate and shadow Justice Secretary has taken his chances and left Kemi Badenoch with one man down. It's worth noting that Robert Jenrick isn't just any old Tory. He was a man with such a furnace of ambition in the pit of his belly that he would probably have gone anywhere if it meant that his chances of personal success would be realised. Put it this way, if you said to Robert, right, it's your career or your mother, which one is it? He would say, can I get back to you on that? Yesterday, the journalist Matthew Parris had this to say about Jenrick.
He has a mixed reputation, to put it kindly, amongst his colleagues in the Conservative benches. He's known to be furiously, frantically ambitious. Were you to remove ambition from the core of Robert Jenrick, he would collapse like a boneless chicken.
It's the boneless chicken analysis from Matthew Parris. I also heard from a former colleague that when the Rwanda scheme was announced, he didn't vote for that, by the way. Young Bob Jenrick was having none of it. He said he was so outraged, he said it was cruel. He thought the scheme was cruel. And apparently, I know you hear these kind of stories, but once in a while they come from a good source. Apparently he cried his eyes out. He cried because he thought the Rwanda scheme was too cruel. Yesterday, of course, was a very different picture. He showcased himself as the last voice of common sense in the Conservative Party and a lone figure when it came to that crucial issue of immigration.
Priti Patel, the shadow foreign secretary, created the very migration system that enabled 5 million migrants to come here, the greatest failure of any British government in the post-war period. When asked about this last year, she defended her actions. She doesn't believe she did anything wrong.
Well, it wasn't just that, of course. Not just Priti Patel and immigration that was really boiling Jenrick's spuds.
The Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride, has rightly attacked Labour for hiking taxes to fund more scrounging. But there's just one problem. He was the cabinet minister who oversaw the explosion of the welfare bill. And it was him who blocked the reforms that are needed.
He's going both barrels, boy. Yeah. So there it is. He's had enough and he's done.
I can't, in good conscience, stick with a party that's failed so badly, that isn't sorry, that hasn't changed, that I know in my heart can't deliver what's needed.
And that is pretty much the centre of what we're asking this afternoon. The question here isn't about Titchy Bob or reform. I'm interested in the world's most successful political party, the Conservatives. 1834 2004 was when they kicked it all off. So Robert Peel was the main man. He became Prime Minister not once but twice. And since then, they've formed 19 governments. Nowhere on planet Earth is there a rap sheet of success like the Conservatives, up until, well, about now, really. And, of course, it's all falling down around them in many respects. The generic resignation, or the generic firing, I should say, we asked yesterday, does it actually add to the credibility of Kemi Badenoch? I mean, what she did do in the, if you like, the modern world of 24/7 media, etc., she got in there first, and that's quite a crucial card to play. But what about everything else? Can the Conservative Party actually survive? I think there's a lot of reform voters out there, a lot of people intending to vote reform, fed up with the Tories, who would go back to the Conservatives if they thought things were starting to move. And of course, it always used to be you could only win an election from the centre. I mean, that was almost taught not just in MP college, but taught in school, in politics. That's how you win elections. You're in the centre. You're never going to win it if you go that way or that way. It doesn't work like that. I think that has changed. And now, whether it's changed irredeemably, whether we are going through a kind of a blip, I suppose it depends on how you define the centre. There's all of that as well. Can the Tories survive? 0344 499 1000. You can voice note us there as well at 87222 if you'd like to send a message. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Oscar Redrop is with us, former number 10 advisor, of course, when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, and a man who, I'm assuming you are still a Conservative, Oscar, unless there's something you want to tell us.
Well, I've been thinking long and hard. No, of course I am. Of course I am in. Very, very loyal Conservative as I sit here now today.
Yeah, as you sit here now today. Is it becoming increasingly difficult to be a Conservative?
Yesterday was challenging, I think. It was the first time, so when the announcement was made, I think Kemi did a really, really good job of getting ahead of that. How that cuts through to the general public, I think, is minimal. I think really, ultimately, if we're really honest as Conservatives here, what really cuts through to people who don't watch and listen to, every breathing word of politics every day is leading light of the Conservative Party joins reform. That equals Conservatives weaker, reform stronger. I think that's ultimately where we're at. Yeah. And the Tories have to accept that. But look, throughout the day, I felt pretty strong and, backed the Conservatives, and I felt even more solidarity. Then I watched his speech, and I was all very much prepared to throw tomatoes and boo and hiss. And it was in two halves. His ability to identify all the problems with the country made me really pause. And I thought, wow, I mean, this is quite powerful stuff and is really hitting every single nail on the head. The stuff about really going for former colleagues personally, rightly or wrongly, and hey-ho, I wasn't in the room at that time, maybe rightly, okay? It's not a good look. And I don't think the British people like that because, it's not just politicians, if you go to join a new company and you leave your job and it got back to the people you used to muck in and work with every day that you were, slagging them off to your new employees, I don't think that would look good at all. And so I thought that was a really, really bad look from Rob, I have to say.
In terms of where the Conservatives go, we're asking that question, Oscar. Can the Tories survive? It happened in Canada in a slightly more devastating way. A few years back, of course, they were wiped out. They came back from the ashes, sort of. But in terms of our Conservative Party, as I went through all the dates and everything, the most successful political party in history, Robert Peel, on we go through the ages, through the big names, the Churchills, the Thatchers, you name it. They've been front and centre, and here they are, limping like a Lib Dem. What is going on?
It's obviously a very, very tough time for the Conservative Party, long term. And this is why I think sometimes those that have crossed the floor to reform are taking a real risk, real risk. If you do a deal with the devil, and I mean that kind of jokingly, as Farage is very much seen by many traditional Conservatives, you need to know what you're getting in that deal. And that still remains to be seen. Yes, Reform are looking really, really good. Yes, as we sit here now, Farage looks like he may, if there was an election tomorrow, Farage would be prime minister. But sometimes you need to think longer term than that. And longer term would include till the next election. Who the hell knows where we'll be in a couple of years' time? And then even further than that, sometimes you need to think in 5 and 10 years' time. And in that sense, I think the Conservative Party will be absolutely fine. However, and this is a really substantive point, so yes, Westminster got really excited about Kemi getting ahead of it, and that's all good stuff. And Kemi showed some really good characteristics yesterday. Materially, what she may have done, though, is I imagine that the talks that Farage and Jenrick would have had, and they would have wanted to plan this much, much better. It would have been, well, Rob, are you confident you can bring some of your loyalists with you? Yeah. Because, yes, I want you, but it would be really, really good if you could really drain that party for me. Let's eat it from the inside. Could you bring 10 of your loyalists with you? And I think the way that Kemi kind of spiked it all yesterday makes that harder. So if in the look, and I might be completely wrong, and you can play this back, and 5 or 10 MPs do drift across with Rob, and I look like an idiot. If that does happen, then wow, fair play. Yep. The Tory party's in a real mess. If it doesn't happen, just very, very quickly, if that doesn't happen, then the Reform have gained Rob Jenrick. Good stuff, great. The Tories have lost him, and that's about where it ends.
Do you think that the idea that Robert Jenrick is, this kind of new Reform character, and there's suggestions that he might bring others with him. Do you think the idea of that happening in the next week or so is a very real one? I'm hearing people saying that within days there could be a kind of calculated, choreographed trickle. Each day a new Tory leaves and joins Reform. Are you seeing that or hearing that? You've got your ear to the ground on these things, Oscar.
Well, I mean, look, as we know, duplicity is it's alive and well in British politics. So even people who are turning around and absolutely pledging allegiance to the party, who knows?
What about that? Sorry, do continue.
Who knows? I'm fairly confident that in terms of those senior figures and cabinet in the Tory party have felt pretty horrified actually by what's happened, and actually the counter effect that's had is the slingshot, if you like, is that there's a solidarity amongst the Tory party now, and I think that if Kemi continues, I mean, I've said this before, I actually think, and people might watch this and go, what the hell are you talking about? Get in the real world. And maybe the bar's quite low, but I think Kemi Badenoch is the fastest improving politician in the UK right now, and if she can continue on that trajectory, and I think yesterday she wouldn't have been able to do what she did yesterday 6 months ago.
That's very true. What about this business, though, Oscar? I alluded to it at the start of governing from the centre. That was always the mantra. You have to be, if you're not in the centre, you're knackered. And that way you kind of hoover up the odd floating voter. Plus, even those that aren't necessarily super supporters of you can still respect you because you're not out there in any kind of particular way. Is that a thing of the past now, this govern from the centre? Or have we just moved the centre?
No, I think it has. I think that has changed. I think people do want drastic change. And again, Robert Jenrick in the first half of his speech, which he could have given as a Tory, ironically, I think personally, was absolutely spot on in terms of identifying those ills. It has changed, but I still think, and there's work to be done here for Reform, and I don't think Rob himself is the solution to this. You can centre, right, left, whatever you want to call it, the economy is still, we are still run by elections in terms of trust on the economy. And I think Reform have a lot of work to do on that. I'm not saying they can't do that, but they have a lot of work to do on that. And I think actually, considering where the Tories were with Liz Truss, I think Mel has his faults, his pros and his cons, but I think Mel and Kemi have gained are starting to gain real trust on managing the economy and the support that they've thrown behind small businesses. And, I don't want to bore into that too much, but are starting to gain ground on that. And I think they've slightly, I think that they're ahead of reform on things like that. And so that's where the election will be. Yes, immigration, of course, but the economy runs through immigration. It runs through everything. Just lastly, the ambition that was piping hot clearly in Generic for so long, I get it, but ambition is a good thing in politicians. It's often, Boris had it in Bagspol, but if ambition isn't matched with kind of a bit of consistency and an ideology, then it is just ambition, and that burns very, very, very briefly, I think, ultimately.
Indeed. Oscar, stay with us. More to come. And, of course, we're taking your calls on this as well, particularly on that question, can the Tories survive? It's an obvious thing to follow on from what happened yesterday, and many saying, actually, Kemi Bay might look stronger after this. Regardless of that, as a party, as an entity, can a Conservative Party survive? This one in from Sarah in Portsmouth. Afternoon. Yes, the Tories will survive. 3 years is such a long time in politics. 3.5, in fact. I'm very happy that there are now two parties on the right spectrum of politics. That gives people much more choice to find a party that suits them best, from the centre-right to the more right of right. Best wishes, says Sarah. And of course it depends what your flavour of politics is. I mean, there are not unreasonable arguments, I'm sure these will change, that actually reform is a one-trick pony. It's immigration. They're very strong on that. They know what they're doing. But beyond that, have they got the apparatus in place? The ideology? Is there a naturalised kind of vibe around their thinking, reformism, that would improve the NHS, that would improve defence, that would improve the police and education, all those kind of areas as well. So those kind of questions will become more pertinent as we head towards 2029, of course. But where we are today, after the Generic exit, which individually, in one respect, he's not a great loss, in another respect, he's symbolic of something actually quite huge. Where does it leave the Tories? Can they survive? 0344 499 1000. Voice notice there as well. You can message 87222. It's 1:20. This is Talk.
We no longer have a prime minister in any sort of normal sense of the word. We have a spectre. Keir Starmer. He has no plan. He has no strategy.
Are you surprised at how bad it's gone?
I genuinely struggle to align the Keir Starmer we are seeing as prime minister with the Keir Starmer who was leader of the opposition.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Barbara says, Ian, I would not vote for the Tories again with Badenoch as leader. She calls dissenting voices in her party rubbish to be cleared out. Also, she does not have an authoritative presence on the world stage. When she appeared with Trump, she looked like a groupie. I do wonder how much of that, though... It's a great point, Barbara, thank you. I do wonder how much of that we project on someone. I've said this so many times, you know, before Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, even when he was Chancellor, I just couldn't imagine this guy as Prime Minister. It seemed the most ridiculous, this kind of studious, slightly scruffy, hunched character, never known to smile unless absolutely forced to. I thought, this guy could never make the Prime Minister. And then he becomes the Prime Minister, and I'm sitting there in an area called Portcullis House, which is sort of bolted on to Westminster, and the doors fly open, and in walks Gordon Brown heading towards PMQs, flanked by about sort of 12 armed characters. And he looked like a Prime Minister. It's interesting, once you're kind of in the gig, you project that status onto the person really rather quickly, which is interesting. We've got Oscar Reddrop with us. We've also got a voice note. This is aimed at you, Oscar. It comes from Mark in Manchester. Here it is.
I just heard an Oscar there saying about, oh, we've got to look at the long term, us Tory voters and that. They had 14 years. How long did he want? 14 years. And he's talking about long term and not the short term. Your long term's over. You have 14 years. That's it.
How many years? 14 years, Oscar. Come on, it's your fault. What are you talking about, man? Says Mark in Manchester.
No, Mark's right. I mean, the 14 years record of the Tories was mixed, to say the least. I just mean in terms of, I just mean in terms of the prospects between trying to measure an election.
Yeah.
You know, 3.5 years before polling day is difficult, and that those that have jumped to reform are taking a risk. But I mean, if you cut to the heart of what he's saying there, he's absolutely right. The Tories have a mountain to climb. And to be frank, any Tory that kind of rubbishes that, or, you know, is living in a, you know, make-believe land, unfortunately.
Yeah, true. Let's move to this story. We've been counting down for the last sort of 48 hours on the police chief of West Midlands finally resigning, Oscar. He hasn't gone. There is some suggestion he might go today. Let's have a reminder, though, what the Home Secretary said about the Chief Constable on Tuesday.
The ultimate responsibility for the force's failure to discharge its duties on a matter of such national importance rests with the Chief Constable. And it is for that reason that I must declare today that the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police no longer has my confidence.
It was Wednesday, actually, Oscar, and he's still in his job. No, ordinarily, when a Home Secretary says, I haven't got confidence in a Chief Constable, that's the end of it. There's no going back from that, but he's hanging on.
Which is just remarkable. If he doesn't go before the weekend, you know, I honestly cannot understand what's happening here. It is, I mean, it's quite remarkable when your incompetence kind of brings together politics. You know, there's complete consensus that he shouldn't be there in the position a minute more, pretty much. I would actually say, you know, as I'm on the Tory hard sell this afternoon, you know, the new Shadow Justice set, Nick Timothy, has been onto this guy for a long old time. It has just been mistake after mistake, incompetence after incompetence. It's funny, isn't it, when the bar is so low in terms of, like, also government competence as well. Yeah. When you see the Home Secretary there on Wednesday just kind of doing, like, something that's so sensible and obvious and clear in declaring that kind of vote of no confidence, if you like, it looks remarkably competent. When we look at the other decisions and other stances the Labour government have taken, we are hearing that he will be resigning today for his own good and own sake. I don't understand the rationale in trying to hang on, you know, because you do it before the weekend, let the Sunday papers kind of rip you to bits, and then, you know, get on with your life. Yeah, he can go and have a frat and play golf all weekend, and I'm sure there'll be some kind of financial assistance when he goes, but I guess it's about, you know, credibility and all the rest of it. What a way to go. Final one here. Mental health is the most common reason that children are homeschooled.
It's interesting. I think every parent, we've had this discussion at home, you know, homeschooling, would it work, might work for one of our kids, could be a good thing. It's anything but a straightforward thing to do. It's quite consuming in lots of respects. It can also be quite expensive. It's not always just about mum or dad sitting there trying to teach your 14-year-old the way around an algebraic equation. They may also have you might hire the odd tutor or book a tutor for a certain lesson. So there's expenses involved, a lot of dedication, but official figures now show 126,000 kids were home educated up to autumn 2025, and mental health is the most common reason. Should we be worried about this, Oscar?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, mental health and anxiety in children is an interesting one for me. I feel that without being cold or cruel, with children, you kind of want them to get out there a bit, because I think instilling that resilience at an early age is probably a good thing. And that kind of the mollycoddling thing that happens, and then years go by, and all of a sudden they're an adult and they've never had to confront or deal with things, and people can give up at that point because they haven't built in that strength. I think homeschooling is fine and good, and people should have the option to do that if it works for them. Yeah. But there is something to be said for getting out there, and experiencing school and experiencing difficulties and mixing with different types of kids from different types of backgrounds, and having good days and having bad days. Anxious kids as a concept, and I'm not a child psychologist, it won't surprise people to know. Really? It seems that seems like an odd thing from a medical standpoint. Of course, you can feel anxiety as a child. Obviously, you probably do quite a lot. But as a medical standpoint, that feels kind of odd to me. I don't know about you, Ian.
It does, but I can also see, and these are things I would never have thought about until I became a parent, got a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old. I can see how the kind of one-size-fits-all model of schooling, the more I think about it, is a bit weird as well. I'm not suggesting I've got no better solution, and it's probably the best of all solutions to have this school. But the fact that millions of children on an annual basis are put pretty much, there's a few exceptions, private schools, extra tuition, etc. But generally speaking, to put through this sort of syllabus and this same template, both in terms of what they learn and the structure within which they learn, taking into account good teachers, bad teachers. Broadly speaking, we have one system for everyone. And I do wonder sometimes whether that is ultimately, as we get to know more about the world we live in and artificial intelligence, futures changing, etc., I wonder whether that will change in some kind of way, whether homeschooling will become a more obvious choice regardless of mental health.
Well, I have to say, it's not just exclusive to children, really. I mean, since COVID, there's a lot of people who homework all day long.
Yeah, true. Lazy swines.
Lazy swines.
So we do wonder, we will sit and watch with interest how our kids get on, but I am intrigued. Anyone out there who does homeschooling, do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Listen, Oscar, thank you for your time as ever. Have a great weekend. We will speak again very soon. He is Oscar Redrop, former advisor to Boris Johnson when he was the Prime Minister at number 10. Over to you as well. A whole load of stuff to get into. I mean, the schooling from home thing is kind of interesting. I'm told, because you always think, well, your kid's never going to know any other kid. And then somebody goes, oh, actually, there's these organisations in every area. You'll find a kind of schooled-at-home group, on social media somewhere. They all get together. They have days out. So there is another option. There's, I don't know. I find it a massive pond in which to dip your toe, because it may not work. Homeschooling, but more and more are doing it. The main reason is mental health, but I do meet some people who just do it because they think their kid gets a better education. I think somebody told me, somebody explained to me, it's like if you've got it right, it could be like your kid is getting 10 times more the education than they would get at school. But for what they gain, do they lose something in that scenario? If that is you, if you've been there either as a kid or as a parent, If you grew up homeschooled, love to hear from you. And if you do it yourself, 0344 499 1000. Back to the question we threw out at the beginning as well. Can the Conservatives survive? Can the Tories actually survive? I think they will, but it's under what? What's intriguing about that question is it forces you into that, how the landscape has changed. So governing from the centre is no longer quite what it perhaps used to be. And I think much of that has come around, not just because of changing appetites. I think people are more engaged in politics. I think politicians could get away with a whole lot more years ago when all you saw was a newspaper at 9 o'clock in the morning and that was the only news you got. Now people are more discerning. They dig deeper. And politicians have been late to react to that. That's what I sense. 0344 499 1000. Dan Hodges joins us in a few moments to discuss this as well. 1:30, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk at 25 to 3. Of course, we are responding to, well, it's the day after the storm, as it were. How big was that storm for you? It depends on where you're sitting. As a Reform member, as a Conservative member, there are, some Reform people pretty grumpy if any Tory so much as gets near the postcode of Reform HQ. I can sort of see the reasons why, although, what is the option? I mean, everyone's got to have a backstory, haven't they? I mean, does that mean they ban anyone that was whoever voted for any political party? Or is it just the Tories? Where does it leave the Conservative Party? I thought Kemi Badenoch played a blinder, frankly, just on stealing the march and kind of owning the story before anybody else spoke about it. That's kind of important. But as we sit here today and wounds are being licked, where does it leave the Conservative Party? Let's speak to Dan Hodges, commentator with the Mail on Sunday. Afternoon to you, Dan. I mean, never a dull moment down there at Westminster. Yesterday was more drama, this time generic. No real surprise if we stop and think about it that he's finally legged it over there to Reform HQ. But where does it leave the Conservative Party?
I think, to be honest, it leaves the Conservative Party in a stronger position this morning or this afternoon, because it's definitely strengthened the position of the Conservative Party's leader, Kemi Badenoch. I mean, I agree with your analysis. I mean, I thought she did very, very well yesterday in terms of spiking Jenric's guns, spiking Nigel Farage's guns. And frankly, I thought she did a pretty good job of exposing Robert Jenrick for what a lot of his colleagues and a lot of people in Westminster think Robert Jenrick is. I mean, Robert has been out this morning protesting that his move had nothing to do or was not motivated primarily by personal ambition. I think everybody who stood back objectively and looked at what he's done, obviously because it's not the first time he's done it, he obviously did the same thing to Rishi Sunak. This is kind of what I think most people think underpin it. It's Robert Jenrick's own personal ambition, and frankly, I think we had this extended speech yesterday in which he articulated his reasons for defecting, where he was standing alongside Nigel Farage. I think the actual political reality is if Robert Jenrick thought it would get him personally closer to Downing Street, we would have seen him standing next to Zach Polanski yesterday. You know, I mean, I think that is the reality. It's very, very difficult to set aside and remove Robert Jenrick's sort of vaulting personal ambition from this whole saga.
Yeah, and that does seem to be a kind of fairly common knowledge around the room in Westminster, and, you know, he's sort of become this archdeacon of all things immigration related, but he was the guy that didn't like the Rwanda scheme, and in fact the worst story is that he even burst into tears because he thought it was so cruel as a scheme. We can't always corroborate these things, but, you know, there's the word on the Westminster street. So yeah, a bit of a flip-flopper in that respect, personal ambition at the forefront of everything he does. He's certainly not alone in being one of those types at Westminster, but now he's gone, and Kemi Badenoch is a man down. Nick Timothy is certainly, I was about to say, an emerging figure. In Conservative terms, he's not that emerging, of course. Theresa May been around the block for a long time. Fairly powerful voice. Has she got the team there to make it work, though, Dan?
Yes, I think she's certainly got a better team. I mean, frankly, I'm going to be completely honest. I think her team has actually been strengthened by the removal of Robert Jenrick and the promotion of Nick Timothy. I mean, Nick Timothy is someone who is very well respected amongst his colleagues. He's popular amongst Tory activists, and he's someone at a time when I think a number of people are sort of slightly scared that we've got we're getting sucked into a sort of uber Punch and Judy style of superficial politics. He's somebody who does seem to have some gravitas, some heft, and, to use that phrase, something of a political hinterland. So I certainly think his promotion is beneficial. But I also think we need to step back and we need to again look at the context of what happened yesterday. The simple reality is Robert Jenrick was staying in the Conservative Party and had stayed in the Conservative Party precisely because he thought that after May's local elections he would have the opportunity to replace Kemi Badenoch. And the reason he jumped ship yesterday, obviously he was kind of outed, but was preparing to jump ship, was because he's quite clearly made the calculation there is simply not going to be a vacancy after May, which is why he's gone. And I think that's indicative of something that we've been seeing for several months now. And you know, I was very, very critical about Kemi Badenoch in the early stages of her leadership. I was one of many who thought that she would definitely be gone after May, but certainly since Tory party conference, her speech at party conference, since her response to the budget, there is no doubt that she is starting very, very slowly to sort of drag the Tory party out of the abyss. Now we have to caveat that. Obviously, we've got a situation here where the right in British politics are currently sort of fractured straight down the middle. But to go back to your original point, a lot of people thought after the last election that the Tory party was dead. A number of people thought initially thought under Kemi Badenoch's leadership it would be interred very, very quickly. I actually think you can see a route back now for the Conservative Party, despite the sort of the dramas of yesterday. Yeah,
that's really the centre of the question. Is there a route back for the Tories? Has it? Just a final point on this, Dan. We spoke to Oscar Redrup a second on this very point as well. Governing from the centre, that was always the rule of thumb. You have to govern from the centre. If you don't, you're dead in the water. Has that changed?
Well, I think I don't think the fundamental principle has changed, but I think what represents the centre has changed, and that's the thing. But I think look, the reality is, and we are starting to see this increasingly, there is a significant anti-reform sort of stop for all reform, stop farage vote and mood starting to develop in the country. And Kemi Badenoch, as a result of what she did yesterday, I think is in a better position to exploit that now than she was 24 hours ago.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, her star, I know it's a horrible cliche, but her star seems to be rising and all the rest of it. Is it now about Tories putting meat on the bones of policy? There has been a lot of almost trying to out-reform, ECHR, those kind of things. What's their most advisable route to, other than, watching other politicians fall by the wayside, maybe reform, perhaps slowing down a tad? What is to be that real credible force? What route do they need to take? What does Kemi Badenoch need to do?
I think we kind of saw the model in the last quarter of last year. Kemi Badenoch took the decision months, 2 or 3 months out from the budget, that she was going to focus very, very much and almost exclusively on the economy as the fundamental issue, and not get sucked into some of the culture war issues that obviously Nigel Farage is so masterful at exploiting. And that was successful, because as soon as the conversation switched onto the economy, Nigel Farage and reform were kind of sidelined. They weren't really in the debate. So I think the key for Kemi Badenoch and her team is, to what extent can they keep the focus on the economy? Can they keep the focus on those bread and butter issues? Yeah. Labour has obviously destroyed its own credibility with obviously the budget and hiking taxes on working people and reversing the pledge not to hike taxes on working people. Reform do not have anything that I think remotely resembles a coherent economic strategy at the moment. That is the opening for Kemi Badenoch and the Tories. The question is whether they can keep the focus on that over the next 12 months.
Dan, thank you. Great to see you again as well. Dan Hodges, commentator with the Mail on Sunday, columnist over there too. Thank you to him. Let's book with Tom Jones. He's a Conservative councillor for Scotland Lower Wensleydale. Afternoon to you, Tom. I mean, look, it's tricky time to be a Tory. Once upon a time, you couldn't even say you were a Tory because people thought, you're that kind of bizarre group of mad right-wingers. That kind of tag has been given to somebody else now. Who are the Tory party and can they survive? Afternoon to you, Tom.
Afternoon. What an amazing opening question. I think actually one of the interesting things about the Jenrick defection, you've just touched on it there. What is the Tory party? I think Jenrick leaving is both a cause and a function of basically reform now existing as an outlet to the right. I think his declining stock and position in the party is because a lot of the basically right-wing members who would have been shaking the tree to get rid of Kemi and get Jenrick in have now left to reform. So I think basically we are a much more, we have moved to the right, but I think we are a much more centrist party simply because of reform's existence and because of the fact that for the last year they have turned what most people thought was a temporary polling bounce into, I think they've been in the lead for something like 300 polls. It's something crazy now. Yeah.
Did you vote for Robert Jenrick to be leader of your party?
I not only voted for him, I campaigned for him very actively. Okay. And the great thing about lost causes is that you can never be proven wrong.
Yeah. So what do you make then of his defection? Are you going to follow him?
I'm not personally, no. I'm not standing again on the council, so I'm just going to see what happens, basically.
Is that because you're fed up of being a Tory?
No, I just think I don't want to stand again, but basically I think it's a good time to kind of see where the right is going to land. I think we're going through a seismic change. It's similar to Canada in the early 90s, where the establishment right-wing party was taken over by an insurgent right-wing party, and I think that might be what we're living through right now.
I mean, Reform are interesting. They often get accused of being a one-trick pony, that it's all about immigration and beyond that, and Dan Hodges was just talking about the economy. He senses that Reform are quite weak in that department, and actually that could be the Kemi Badenoch and the Conservatives' sort of ace card in this sense, that they will be able to draw out some real credibility despite what's happened in the past. Do you share that analysis that, you know, not everything is fine and dandy in the land of Reform?
No, I absolutely share that analysis. So Reform are in the kind of nascent stages of policy development. Denny Kruger has been put in charge of preparing them for government. They now have a reform-aligned think tank that's starting up. Basically, because they're an insurgent party, they can't rely on the kind of policy development and talent pipeline networks that an existing party like the Conservatives have got. And it is taking them a while to get up to speed with that. I think Dan is right that there is a particular problem on the economy where the Tories are particularly strong, but there was a poll the other day that showed Reform were the most trusted on the economy. You know, at the end of the day, yes, they don't have a plan, but there are a lot of people who are supporting Reform, not for a change of government, but for a change of regime.
Yeah, it is that. Will Kemi Bates not last till the 2029 election then, do you sense, Tom? What's your assessment of her as your leader?
Well, Jenrick's removal has really strengthened Kemi's personal position, because now her most kind of likely rival has now been removed, and she's taken the sting out of the tail with a defection. She's actually probably handled the defection about as well as she could have done, really. She's certainly safe until May's election, which I think are going to be catastrophic for the Tories, frankly. But basically, there is a lack of a challenger. Her next biggest challenger now is James Cleverly. He's been laying very, very low since he finished third in the leadership election last time round. He was expected to win. There were some suggestions that he was playing some kind of games with lending votes and got booted out by accident. And the other winners from this are the kind of next generation, people like Katie Lamb, who are, you know, maybe thinking about leadership post-Kemi, post the 2029 election. She will certainly last until May. I think Robert Jenrick's removal means she lasts beyond the local elections in May, and I think she probably will take us into the general election.
Can you see the Conservatives forming a government in the next generation, shall we say?
In a political generation, yes, within a very kind of specific set of circumstances. And I think that probably the circumstances are going to be that Reform come in 2029 and make such an unholy mess of things. I mean, basically declaring nuclear war on ourselves. They'll have to do that badly. I think then at that point we could see the Conservatives coming back in. But I think it's probably going to be 15 to 20 years minimum.
Wow, that's interesting. Not great news for Kemi if she's listening. Tom, thank you very much indeed. Very honest assessment from Councillor Tom Jones. He's a Conservative councillor for Scotland and Lower Wensleydale. Thank you, although he's finishing that role fairly soon, from perhaps May, from what I can gather from what he just said. It's kind of fascinating. What are the political appetite? I think the word common sense, we're the home of common sense here, OK? That, I think, is what people are crying out for. I don't think this is just about immigration, ultimately. It's such a huge strand of this. I mean, it's massive. Let's not underplay that. But I think it's the sense of a country that's lost its mind. That's where we're at the moment. And obviously I'm thinking about, you know, people who go to jail because of something they tweeted, even if they tweeted something so awful and egregious that, you know, you still wonder whether jail time is the right use of kind of our money or anybody's time. It's some of the gender madness. A lot of this stuff really grew and flourished under the last Tory administration. So you've got immigration. It's nonsensical that 60-odd thousand blokes can jump on a rubber boat and start a life in the UK with no permission. That's unfathomable. There's no common sense. The gender issue. Oh, is it a man? Is it a woman? That person over there with the beard and the hairy chest apparently is a woman. No, it's that. It is what you can and cannot say on social media, although I'm now, you know, I'm more aware than ever that social media isn't just a little bit of a playground. It plays an important role in life, rightly or wrongly. So it has to adhere to, you know, some rules and regs, but I don't think we send people to jail for stuff there, do we? Unless they've literally threatened to kill you. So there's all of that I think feeds into the sense that whether it's the Tories or Labour or whoever, that our country has lost its mind. So yes, immigration is the underpinning big one, but there's all these other strands of nonsensical things that have happened and erupted over the last decade or so. 0344 499 1000. Can the Tories survive? This is Talk.
I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. His WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Very exciting, of course. The World Economic Forum begins in Davos on Monday. I'm flying off later this afternoon as soon as I finish the show to give a bit of a keynote. Obviously, down there, you will own NAFL, mate, and you will be happy. Spoiler alert, I'm not going to Davos, but we are going to report on it next week because Donald Trump is going to be speaking at the World Economic Forum on Wednesday. It should be when we're on air. I reckon he's going to give this organisation an absolute pasting publicly. He did it with the United Nations, don't you remember? It was the United Nations. He gave a big speech at the United Nations and essentially said, what's the point of the United Nations? You know, you don't do anything, you guys. Paraphrasing there. I reckon the WEF are going to get a bit of that treatment from Trump, but he speaks there on Wednesday afternoon. You will hear it live on this programme. Mark is in Manchester on the Tories. Can they survive? Mark, afternoon to you.
Yeah, afternoon, Ian. My thing is, yes, I think they will survive because they're full of hubris. But
what are you going to say then? Full of something.
Yeah, whether they should survive, I don't think they should.
Okay.
You know, their record is extremely poor. Their brand is tarnished. I don't know whether it's fatally tarnished, but it's tarnished very close to being fatally tarnished.
Has it become, just on that point, Mark, we talked about this either yesterday or the day before, when people go, 14 years of failure. And I would kind of push back on that a bit because up to about their 10th year or their 8th or 9th year, nobody was ever saying it's a decade of failure other than the Labour Party. It suddenly became a kind of a thing that everybody started saying. 5 of those years they were in coalition, of course, so there wasn't much going on. Then there was Brexit. Was everything bad under the Tories from 2010?
Well, I would say probably not, but I'd group the Tories with the rest, you know, with Labour and everything else sort of post-war. Our debt's gone skyrocketed.
Correct.
At the end of the day.
Yep.
The Tories have never done anything for that. They've been in power for a long time.
True.
I mean, obviously, last time they had the Liz Truss debacle with the economy. So, I mean, can you trust them on the economy? I just think going into an election, I mean, you can change if you have a bottle of mayonnaise and you relabel it tomato sauce. You know, you've got to be foolish to taste it again and think, oh, you know, this tastes like tomato sauce. It's just it's a rebranding. Their PR people have obviously said, look, you know, it was a disaster last time. Anyone asks you about it, just say, well, yeah, we apologise for that. We didn't do very well, but we are now different.
Where specifically, though, did they... What was the point that they really put their foot on the landmine as a Conservative Party? Is it immigration? Was it the whole kind of the locked? I'm tempted to say lockdown and COVID, which is where it all went wrong. And then there was the Boris thing. Then we had Rishi and God knows what else. Was it then? Was there something else more specific that they did wrong?
I think that was the straw on the camel's back, to be honest. I think if you look at Boris Johnson's record on immigration, if you look at the Tories' record on the loans that they gave out, if you look at the Tories' record on the PPE, on the other Tories that they had the nose in the trough with regard to, here's 20 million, give it to someone who we know who knows nothing about PPE, but who says they know someone in the Far East who can, for someone like me who's a businessman, who's a Conservative with a small c, there's very little way back from that. There's very little way back from that because you can say, well, we've got a different leader now, but at the end of the day, it was your party that acted like that under pressure. You say you're the party of business, but you didn't act like the party of business when the pressure came. So where are we going to go? And if they had a leader that was messianic, I'd say you've got a chance. Kemi Badenoch seems competent. But competent isn't going to do it for the Tories. They need someone who's messianic, someone who you look at and go, yes, this person is it. This person is the person I'm going to vote for. Not the brand, but this person is the person I'm going to vote for.
And that's what Farage has got, isn't it? Because Farage has... I mean, I'm sure somebody could and many people probably have, it's the sort of thing students would do in their dissertation, that you deconstruct Nigel Farage. But you would have to conclude that he is that kind of mesmeric character that does enamour people and draw people into his world. There is something about Farage people like, and they're drawn to.
I would agree with that, but I mean...
So you say the Tories need one of them?
I think the Tories need one of them, but the thing that Nigel Farage isn't saddled with is history. So until he takes the political leadership and then tries to do something, and then that comes undone, he's got a massive advantage. He's not defending anything going into the next election. He's only criticising, and he's only going forward with whatever policies they're going to come through with. Yeah. So I mean, until I read Rory Stewart's book, I actually believed that the government could change things and they could do what they said they were going to do. But I really don't believe that anymore.
Maybe I need to read Rory Stewart's book. Was it a good book?
You definitely do. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think that will be the test after the next election.
Okay. Well, we'll give it a go. Listen, Mark, great call as well. Really nice chatting on this. Thank you to Mark in Manchester. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. Rory Stewart's written a good book. I'm struggling with that. More comment on the way right now. The time is exactly 2 o'clock. Let's get the news headlines.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. That's where you will find us. Coming up this afternoon, following on from what happened yesterday, this was Robert Jenrick walking the plank from Tory HQ and legging it to reform. We know the rest, of course. Question is, where does this leave the Tories? Yesterday, people were sort of tacitly saying, well, Kemi Badenoch did the right thing by firing him. But beyond that, that story is gone now. Where do the Tories go next? Can the Tories even survive? 0344 499 1000. We're also going to be talking about the defiant police chief in the West Midlands, who's still hanging on in there. Could have hours to go, though. I reckon he's got 2 hours before he has to quit. The Mail have reported that Craig Guilford is expected to go today. This, of course, is over the Maccabi football fans scandal. Or is he going to hold on again? Details on that. Our ministers will raise the age for the strategic reserve from 55 to 65 under measures aimed at preparing the nation for war. Well, that sounds fantastic. If you're 85, are you ready? Get your guns out, boys, because you're going over. Details to come. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Loads to get through at this end. More comment from you. This one from Yvonne in Somerset. I don't understand the criticism of Robert Jenrick and his ambitions. All politicians were made from the same cloth. So what? It's a good point, actually. When it comes to that burning furnace of ambition, no one had it more than Boris Johnson in that sense. And the only other person that I think I would put alongside, up until we all started talking about Robert Jenrick, will be Keir Starmer, because Keir Starmer's another one that, in fact, him and Johnson are quite similar in the sense that they both. Do you remember they used to say about Boris Johnson? He's a man that wanted to become the Prime Minister. He's a man that wanted to say he'd been the Prime Minister. He just didn't like the bit in the middle. And that kind of worked for me. Like all that, doing it? I've got to do it as well. I just want to say I've done it. The actual doing it. Keir Starmer again, you know, you go into law, you become the Director of Public Prosecutions, which is a big gig. On the legal CV, that doesn't really get any bigger. And I remember talking to a lawyer who was training round about the same time as Starmer, and the one thing of note of Starmer was that he was so ludicrously ambitious and was always going to get that DPP job. That was always going to be his. And now he's the Prime Minister. But I don't know why he wanted to be why did he want to be the Prime Minister? What did he think? I know why Thatcher wanted to be the Prime Minister. I know why Blair wanted to be the Prime Minister. I can just about understand why Brown wanted to be the Prime Minister. I know why Jeremy Corbyn wants to be. I don't know why Starmer wants to be the Prime Minister. So Yvonne is quite right. There's a big old list of over-ambitious half-wits in Westminster who may well talk a good game. You might see them on a panel show and you think, they're quite entertaining, aren't they? Pretty good when they do question time, stuff like that. But what are they really looking for? And this story, which we've touched on every single day for the last week, the countdown for the sacking of the West Midlands police chief is ongoing. This is Chief Constable Craig Guilford. Reports suggest he could be gone today. Let's not hold our breath, and let's remind you what the Home Secretary said on Wednesday.
The ultimate responsibility for the force's failure to discharge its duties on a matter of such national importance rests with the Chief Constable. And it is for that reason that I must declare today that the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police no longer has my confidence.
And ordinarily, that would be the end of it. The Chief Constable would say, yeah, very sorry about that. Once she said that, I can't hang on. But on this occasion, I will. Let's speak with Nicole Lampert. Political journalist. Nicole, good afternoon to you. And hang on, he is. I mean, as I said, any other day of the week, it would have been end of. You can't really function as a Chief Constable if the Home Secretary doesn't have faith in you. But this fella's hung on, it seems, with a little bit of help from his Police and Crime Commissioner, who could sack him but hasn't. But is today D-Day for Mr Guilford?
I don't know. I wish I knew. Like, you know, as you said, like, and you know, in a normal world, this would as soon as the Home Secretary withdrew support for him, and as soon as a report came out showing how the force had lied and lied and lied, then he would be gone. But the fact that he's hanging on, that he won't be sacked, Apparently last night, other police people, senior police officers were calling him and saying, please, this looks really bad for the police that you're hanging on. And still, you know, when I was asked to come on here a few hours ago, I presume that by now he would be gone, and he's still there. He's still hanging on. So what is he waiting for? It's, to me, what it sums up is that the Birmingham is a place that needs to be put into special measures, and it's being run like a kind of almost mafia state, where normal ways of behaviour has gone out the window.
It does seem, I mean, there's all sorts of ways we can point our finger, I think, at Mr. Guildford, and, you know, by his own admission, by the admission of his office, they really cocked up this football thing in a big way, and then it went from, no, we didn't do that, to, oh, yes, we did do that. And, you know, when a police chief has to say, I used a bit of iffy AI to get my intelligence, I mean, that's game over, isn't it, when you're the top man?
Normally, you know, it's not just that they used AI, it's that he then denied in front of a House of Commons committee twice that they'd used AI. And then it was only after this report into their behaviour came out that he was like, actually, we did use AI. And if you're, you know, the head of the police and you don't even know what AI is, or whether you used it, or you're not apologising for the fact you just a report completely made up a game, then there is something so corrupt here. It kind of reminds me of the 70s and 80s, where there were the police officers and the Masons and you know, the police officers and the criminals working hand in hand, and there was this kind of secret stuff going on, which is why, you know, there was a kind of big push to get rid of that kind of conspiracy gone from the police, but it's all gone straight back because the normal way of behaviour of you know, even to go back to the initial stuff, which is they made up a load of lies about the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans because the Islamists on the ground had threatened violence against them, and then instead of admitting their fears about violence against the Israeli Tel Aviv fans, they instead said it's the Tel Aviv Maccabi fans that are the problem, they are the danger. Which you even on the night we could see that was completely wrong. There were no Tel Aviv Maccabi fans, and they had 700 police officers because of the trouble they were still expecting. So they're lying to us, they're lying to the British public. We can all see this. This totally diminishes any trust we have in the police. And for me, even if he goes, Birmingham as a whole needs to be looked at.
Yeah, and well, indeed, this idea of, you know, almost, I can't think of, I mean, I've never lived in an area where the police defer almost to either a religion or a community that is underpinned by religion. I mean, I think the fellow from one of the mosques sat on the board that appointed this bloke. And I'm thinking, what on earth are we doing? Why is some religious fella? I don't care whether he's a Jew, a Christian, a Muslim, whatever. No one should be sat on there from where the community... It's not a community thing, that's a religious thing. And it underpinning this whole story, of course, is a nod and an appeasement of that particular group. There's no way around that.
Yeah. And that's why I'm kind of saying it's a kind of mafia element to it, because the mosque is giving the support to the police crime commissioner, who is a political appointment, and he in return is saying, we'll give you money, which is of course public money. And that was and that was despite the fact the mosque was already under criticism for being anti-Semitic, homophobic, misogynistic. But he's saying, we'll give you money. They're saying, we'll give you support. And then they are all behind Guildford. They're, you know, even we saw Ayub Khan, the MP for the area, in the House of Commons, continuing with the lies about the behaviour of the Tel Aviv Maccabi fans. And that's because they want to maintain that fiction that actually, even though this report shows how many lies were told, they want to maintain the fiction that actually it was true, and that really... Well, it was the fault of the Maccabi fans.
Yeah, I mean, I said it yesterday, that particular MP should be in jail for crimes of idiocy, frankly. I mean, calling it a witch hunt and suggesting it was some kind of right-wing powwow that was at work here is just nonsense. I mean, it was demonstrated, as you rightly said, Nicole, by a House of Commons committee that, you know, extrapolated one line out of him, which turned out to be a lie, and then they had to correct it. I mean, this is a complete and utter mess. So if you had to go down to the bookmakers after we finish this interview, Nicole, and put a bet on, firstly, do you think he's going to go? And secondly, can you give us a prediction as to when you think the current Chief Constable of West Midlands, Craig Guilford, when he will be gone?
I think he will be gone by next week, because I think that there are more forces at work. The kind of police standard boards are looking at it.
Yeah.
There may be legal manoeuvres. I know journalists who are working on material for the Sunday newspapers. So I certainly think he'll be gone by mid next week.
Nicole, on that point, thank you very much for your time. Great analysis. Nicole Lampert, the political journalist, with us on Craig Ferguson, the embattled Westminster police chief, who's still hanging on in there. Craig Guilford. What did I call him then? Craig Ferguson. Craig Ferguson, of course, was a talk show host and a comedian. Scottish-born, became an American. Someone's going to go, no, that's not Craig Ferguson. That's someone else. And then I'm going to have to do that again with someone else. No, that was Craig Ferguson, wasn't it? 0344 499 1000. Craig Guilford is still the Chief Constable, but for how much longer? On that point, Michael is in Hertfordshire. What have you got for us, Michael? Afternoon.
Well, good afternoon. I just wanted to say about this MP.
Yeah.
It just shows you, even when the truth and the facts come out, they don't care. They've got their own agenda, and whatever you say is just ignored. I mean, you've got this this Jewish teacher that wasn't allowed to go to a school. You've got pop bands singing death, death to the IDF.
Yep.
I'd like to make a statement here. How many Jewish terrorists have there been in Europe in the last 50 years? And how many Islamic terrorists have been there in the last 50 years?
And isn't that interesting? Is it, if you use that as a backdrop, bearing in mind this police chief clearly was acting consciously or even subconsciously against a backdrop of what he called, the local community, but what he really meant was that sort of Islamic element that were very powerful in that area. He was playing to that particular gallery, and if it was about violent intent, I think you've just made a really good point that backs up the sort of nonsensical position he clearly took on this one. And it does, and thank you, Michael, for that. You make a really good point. It does, by the way, feed into the question we're asking about. Well, we started asking about the Tories, and so often with these debates we end up splintering off into lots of other elements as to why Reform are doing well. It's this kind of stuff as well. The anti-Israel marches that took place. Community leaders standing up before that Maccabi Villa football match saying, you're not coming round our, this is our turf, this is our territory. It's like, mate, some of these people can barely speak bloody English and were proclaiming that this is their patch, don't come round here, this is our neck of the woods. They said, sorry, get in the bin, the lot of you, whoever you are, whatever faith you come from, if that is your take of something, no. We don't function like that. If you want to walk around supporting a medieval death cult every single Saturday through towns and cities in this country, you can also get in the bin. We don't want any of that. This is not how this country functions. That's not about freedom of speech. It's not about democracy. It's about bloody nonsense. And it's dangerous nonsense as well. And we just roll over and go, oh, it's a democracy, freedom of speech, off you go. No, we don't want this kind of caper. It's absolutely horrendous. Jews that can't go into schools. The Jewish MP could not visit a school in his own area because he happened to be Jewish. Well, they said, well, it's not that. It's Israel, isn't it? Well, don't blame the MP, for God's sake. And this is the kind of world we're in, and that's the reason why the upside-down world, the nonsensical world, the world that is just lacking any kind of meaning, that is what Reform are doing. They're picking up on that, under our watch. We won't be doing this kind of thing. Dan is in Portsmouth. Back to the issue of the Tories and co. Dan, what have you got?
Hello, right. When you were speaking to the other caller, you asked him specifically, said, what were the landmines that they trod on the Tories to make them unelectable for you as a Tory voter?
Yeah.
So for me, it's simple. And the first one was net zero. All right.
Good point. That was Theresa May, of course.
No one voted for that. We've got the Green Party to vote for if net zero is higher on our priorities. So no one voted that, and that's the one that's doing arguably the most damage to the country, making it so that we can't afford to get out of the mess we're in.
Yeah.
They're destroying the economy with that. Second one is obviously they ushered in the boats. That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Could be stopped in a heartbeat. Third one's, I think, a little less important, but it makes us laugh. It's not like they're helping to usher in the gender ideology nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Yeah, they did nothing on all of that stuff. They were perfectly relaxed about it. Because I reckon, Dan, I reckon there's a sort of they don't literally go to a school. I'm talking about the sort of Blair, David Cameron, kind of Theresa May, middling kind of thing. They work on the basis that, and I'm sure somebody says to them, look, Prime Minister, you're going to have all these distractions along the way. It might be, in this case, it's gender. It won't last. It won't be game-changing. It'll be annoying for some people, but it won't be significant enough for you to even have to... Don't think about it. Don't even worry about it. And that's what they're they govern on that basis, that the people will get mad, the things they get mad about will change from time to time, but mostly, unless you're talking about going to war, these things go away. Well, some of these things haven't gone away, and that's the bit that politicians haven't caught up with.
Yeah, but it helps to undermine their authority and their credibility. And the final thing, obviously, was lockdown. That was not a conservative policy. The way they dealt with that was not a conservative way. Yeah. There were plenty of people leading the way and showing an example that we could have followed and what they should have followed, but they had no courage. The politicians nowadays have got no courage.
No courage. Yeah, it is as simple as that.
The Conservatives have deserted us and they betrayed us.
So will reform be any different?
No, don't think so. Not if I'm honest with you.
Interesting.
I'd like to think they would. And it's our last chance. And I will hold my nose and vote for him. I can't stand Nigel Farage, but unfortunately, there's no one else with a chance of getting in. But for me, it's Rupert Lowe, but he's not in with a chance. So hold your nose and vote for Nigel and hope for the best.
Gotcha. Dan, great call. Thank you for that. Dan in Portsmouth, who rather articulates the kind of frustration going on here. 0344 499 1000. Kevin O'Sullivan has just sent me a message. He says, you just called him Craig Ferguson, which I did, of course, acknowledge. Kev says, for some reason, I keep calling him Craig Dunlop. Kev says, who the is Craig Dunlop? Where am I getting that from? God knows. It's a good point. I mean, at least Craig Ferguson is a person. That's why he hasn't quit, because no one knows who he is. They're calling out the name. They go, right, it's time to go, Mr. Dunlop. He doesn't answer. Ferguson, get your coat. He doesn't answer. That's all it is. They can't identify the man. They keep doing the paperwork, getting a Craig Smithers. Who's Craig Smithers? That's all that's happened here. It's like big typo thing. 0344 499 1000.
we no longer have a...
From here on in, it's going to be a really interesting ride because, I mean, the challenge Reform will have is having those two great big personalities, those two great big political animals, Jenrick and Farage, in the same space, mainly because they're the same kind of politician. They're street campaigners. They trade on charisma. They are there. They're in your face. Now, I wonder how they're going to get on together.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Pete in Wolverhampton says, afternoon, Ian. Perhaps the Chief Constable of West Midlands is hanging on for an early retirement deal. Well, here's the thing. I don't know how old the fella is. Do you know, it's going to be one of those annoying things when, because I look at coppers like that, Chief Constables, I just automatically assume they're like my dad's age. I bet you that bloke is younger than me. And that, you don't know, a little... Craig. Yeah, we're going to find out how old he is. Craig Ferguson. Sorry, Dunlop. Sorry. Guildford. Him. But usually, if you you'll have some kind of remuneration package, I would imagine, even if he's not at retirement age, there will be something in the in the sort of workings of your resignation that I don't know whether you can pick up your pension early. Can you in that kind of job? I don't know what the deal is. We think he's 50. You see, I just want to weep. How dare you? He's 50. You know the whole thing of, when a copper is, you realise cops are younger than you. Even Finn's had that experience. He's always getting nabbed by the old Bill on a Saturday night. What you doing out there, young scamp? They shout. On Saturday, he got arrested by a 12-year-old. All he was doing was having a beer in the street with his mates. 12, the copper was. Unbelievable. Richard is down in London on the Conservatives and Tory hopes or plights. Richard, what have you got for us?
I hope the Conservatives use what's happened as a bounce back.
Yep.
I thought very interesting what you said earlier about the sense of a country having lost its mind. And I think that is my sense here, and I think I said something similar to you last year. I think I said that if you look at what's happened to Britain and what's happened to Japan following the war, Japan lost the war, but Japan didn't lose its... the Japanese cannot be said to have lost their country. Yeah. They cannot be said to have lost their freedoms, and they certainly haven't lost their minds. And I think, sadly, if you look at what's happened in this country, we can be said to have lost really all three of those things. But I would challenge this broken Britain analysis because I think it's too easy. The only people that have really benefited out of this are Starmer and Farage. And if you track back long enough, the person who invented the idea of the cost of living crisis was dear old Ed Miliband.
He was the first person I ever remember using. I mean, I'm sure the phrase had been used in conversations, but generally speaking, you're absolutely bang on. I remember the time he first said it, and we've never recovered from it since.
And there's a syndrome of blaming politicians for things. Yeah. And the reality is, I just think it's far too easy, and it just doesn't stack up. As you said to a caller a couple of years, about 20 minutes ago, if you look at the record of the Conservatives up until about 2020, it was actually pretty good. I mean, Ian, I remind everybody, we voted for Brexit. They implemented it. If it hasn't worked out well, then I'm sorry, that's democracy. I mean, and really, we can't. The idea that we didn't get the right Brexit, I mean, really, it sounds a little bit like the sort of SWP people saying, well, if you keep trying communism, one day it'll work. I mean, I'm not saying go back on it, but I am. People like Jenrick are saying, oh, the last 30 years, there's got to be more from them. And before I abandon the Conservatives, I want to see what Reform are actually saying. Because, for instance, they've got a new policy. They've got the chap supposed to be policy head, Danny Kruger.
another ex-Conservative. But the reality is, I mean, if you were to ask me what his political philosophy is, I couldn't tell you any more about the ideas of Danny Kruger than I could tell you about the ideas of Freddy Krueger.
Well, you could probably tell us more about Freddy Krueger. He's got funny hands. We know that much.
The thing is, what do they believe? I mean, there's 2 points. I think I said to you last year, when the Conservatives, we were spending £42,000 per household per year in government spending. Yep. And if you look at what most families contribute, I mean, it's a fraction of that. So there's a sense in which Britain has drifted into a something-for-nothing society. Yeah. And you see, what the politicians, rather than all this broken Britain stuff, they've got to ask some really hard questions. Why are we committed to essentially unaffordable government expenditure in areas like pensions or the NHS, for instance, or student loans? We know about the welfare budget. When people say they want to reduce government expenditure, we've got to ask them what will they get rid of?
Yes.
So for instance,
Ian,
if somebody came out and said, well, look, I want a Lloyd George style welfare state where you pay into a pot that looks after you and your family, and that's it. But that wouldn't give you housing benefit or child benefit, or mobility, scrotability, whatever it's called. It would be a very different type of welfare system. I don't think anybody's got the guts to even confront that.
And do you know what? I reckon those suggestions do come up at meetings, either in the civil service or certainly in government. And when people go, well, we could do this, and then somebody points out, well, yeah, you could, but you'd also have to do this and this to get there. Try selling that to the electorate, because everybody does kind of want something, not necessarily for nothing, but they want to see that, it's not going to cost them more, or it's not going to cost some other thing that's going to go in their lives. But until somebody literally fesses up and says, look, everything about the world has changed, certainly in the last 20 years, particularly in the last 10. And if you want these new systems in place, then you've got to work with it. But of course, political parties, Tories, Labour, whoever, who's going to say that out loud? It's a great call, Richard. Thank you for that. Loved chewing the fat on this one. The cost of living crisis. It's interesting that Richard made that reference to Ed Miliband, because I've long banged on about Ed Miliband. This is when he was I think it was when he was leader of the Labour Party, was it? After Gordon Brown. God, it's hard to keep up who's been in charge of which party. And he did at some point, he talked about the cost of a living crisis. And then everybody started talking about the cost of living crisis. And it was never really, although the phrase obviously in itself isn't new, the application of it to form a constant thread in attacking the government was really quite effective. And people started talking about, and I remember thinking, God, when I was little, if, the house I grew up in and the financial environment that I grew up in, both my own parents and pretty much any of our neighbours on the estate we lived on, there was always a cost of living crisis. My sister has perpetually been in a cost of living. She's never not been in a cost of living crisis. But because nobody named it, people just kind of got on with it. So we sort of talked ourselves into this strange, we're all doomed. And, what does the future look? I don't know. I was looking at my 7-year-old last night. I was on the sofa watching a particularly dramatic episode of Henry Danger. If you know, you know. And I just thought, I know there's the future for him to work, but what a great gig being 7. I mean, you know absolutely nothing, right? Let's be honest. You know nothing. You've got to be honest about, even if it's your own kids, they're pretty stupid, right? I mean, they really are. But they're lovably stupid and they're still learning. So in that kind of phase as they go through it, life is just either kind of a drama about nothing, and it's usually about, Steeler brain rot and why Compachina ballerina Macaduda Ricky blah 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 has been stolen from your game, or because, a kid at school has got your fidget spin and you believe they've nicked it out your desk. I mean, that's as bad as it gets. You've got nothing else going on. Wouldn't it be great if they grew up into a world that was just so much better, when in 10 years' time, when he's 17 and he's starting to look around going, what the sort of, what job would I be looking? You'd like to think the opportunities, although they are going to have changed dramatically, but you'd just like to think they're positive ones. Right now, it's a sea of flipping madness out there. 0344 499 1000. 2:30, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This one from Josie in Birmingham says, Ian, I just looked on Google for Craig Dunlop and I found an online counselling and therapy service. Is Kev not trying to tell us something? It's good. It's a very good point, actually. Maybe there's something in that. Reg says, talking about democracy and freedom of speech, why is it that the British government are forbidding a Dutch blonde girl from coming into England to speak? Yeah, that was the Eva story, which is full of all sorts of... I tell you what, I think the most interesting thing about people being banned, whether it's her or someone else, it's not just the people who are told you can't come in because you're not conducive with the public good or something like that. It's the people that are allowed in. You think, hang on, how did he get in? But she can't, and there's no answer. You don't get an answer. She can't get an answer. Nobody can get an answer. Curious times. Reg, thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. The Labour Islamophobic law is still deepening the rebranding, making it sort of a two-tier policing crisis, and could shatter free speech, according to critics. I think most of us kind of already knew this. It is the most preposterous suggestion that has come. The more you look at it and try to make sense of it, the more you realise this comes back to reasons why people are turning to other political parties. These are the kind of reasons. Let's speak with Dr. Rakib Hassan, social policy expert. Rakib, good afternoon to you. Always good to have you with us. I mean, if you ask a Labour MP why we specifically need this law, I've never heard any of them really have an answer to it other than, I think we should, which is not good enough, frankly.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Ian. I think that when we're looking at matters of discrimination and equality, I think we have to make the point that Britain is a world leader on those fronts. And if you look at our existing legislation, we have the 2006 Racial and Religious Hatred Act. Yep. We also have the 2010 Equality Act, as you know, Ian, where religious belief is enshrined as a protected characteristic. So I think many people will ask, is a definition of this nature required, considering the robust equalities legislation that we have in place and the fact that our state institutions, they're legally obligated to advance equality of opportunity, eliminate discrimination, foster good relations between different groups in society under the public sector equality duty. So many people will be asking, what is the actual need for a definition of this nature, and what are the consequences of it, especially when it comes to freedom of expression in modern Britain?
Yeah, like you say, I mean, we talked about this yesterday as well on the programme, Ricky. I mean, the laws are already in place, and if you were to walk down the street and, just shout something, offensive about somebody's colour, the P word, and God knows what else, the thing they're wearing on their head, whatever it happened to be, you could already find yourself in front of the beak. And I think most of us would say, yeah, that's a decent society. We don't tolerate that kind of nonsense. We have a law for it. We don't need another law just for one religion.
Well, I think that's exactly my point. And I think that there's something here to be said about this this working definition, rather, of, well, it used to be called Islamophobia, now it's being changed to anti-Muslim hostility by the working group, which is doing work on this. But as you know, Ian, we also have the IHRA definition on anti-Semitism. And I think what's really interesting here, I don't want there to be any definition which ultimately provides cover for religious theocracies abroad. I don't want that in the slightest. I think that we need to have very open debates in terms of how we feel about foreign political regimes. And crucially, I think we should be able to have discussions about the impact, the social implications of orthodox religious doctrines in modern Britain. And I think the point that I'd make is that I'm a social conservative, Ian. I think that the religious freedoms that we have in the UK, that we have a rich tradition of that, and that we should be proud of that. But at the same time, people should also have the freedom to criticise religious ideologies, the impact of religious doctrines in our modern society. And I think that's part of the social contract. If that you have the freedom to practice your own religion, you have to also accept that people are entitled to criticise your religious beliefs as well. And that's part of being a mature citizen in modern British society.
100%. 100%. Rakib, thank you. More common sense coming from Dr. Rakib Hassan. Thank you to him, social policy expert with us on the programme. Helen says, Ian Collins, oh dear, you're back to calling the religion of 2 billion people a medieval death cult. Why do you keep doing that? It's a bit tiresome. Hamas, mate. Hamas, not Islam. I don't know at which point you would have not got that unless you deliberately decided not to. It's pretty darn obvious. You've never heard me say anything other than that. Hamas, a medieval death cult. ISIS, a medieval death cult. I could go on, whether you want to talk about Houthis or Hezbollah, medieval death cults. These are all areas and places that have taken the Iranian regime, medieval death cult. OK, I hope that clarifies it for you. Gary says, if Starmer doesn't sack Miliband and change course on energy policy, then trust me, voters' exasperation with net zero will be the big issue at the next election, and Reform are the only party with clean hands on that one. The trouble is with incoming governments, if so much work has already been done on something, often an incoming government are faced with this kind of almost impossible dilemma. You've got 80% of a project that, for the good or the bad, is already up and running. Do they dismantle it and start again, or do they continue it? Gary says, sorry, that was Gary. Just Me says, Ian, depending on who you are and where your loyalties lie, I still believe many of our general problems are linked to mass immigration over decades, whether it's NHS being overwhelmed, housing, welfare costs, transport security, and of course motivation and pride. I think that's a fair point. The dilemma is, and I read a story at the weekend, nothing particularly original, but it was based on what would happen if we didn't have immigration at the level. I'm talking about legal immigration here, not people who float across the channel on a rubber boat, people who are legitimately in this country because they got a visa and all the rest of it. If those people were not here, and this is ultimately always the question, would we be able to fill all the jobs that those people come over to fill? That's the only question on this one. Jackie is in Oldham. Back to the Tories and the like, Jackie. Can they survive this? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. I speak as a Reform member, but a previous Tory voter. I think I would disagree with Dan Hodges, where he said this defection of Robert Jenrick strengthens the Tory party. On the Conservative Home popularity ratings, Robert Jenrick is the most popular shadow minister in the party. He was at 60% and Kemi's at 38%. Also,
I wonder why that is, because look, I don't think either of them are going to light up a party if they showed up, OK? I don't. It's just not many politicians, in fairness, can. There's a few exceptions. But what is it that he's doing or was doing that she's not doing? Because she's as sharp as you like. I mean, she's a brain box and all the rest of it. He talks a lot about immigration. Is it just that, or is there something else?
I think it's the fact of he will say the things that in some ways, like Farage, he will lead the conversation and he will go to places where we've not been able to go to have frank discussions about certain subjects.
Sure.
And I don't think that for Kemi, yes, I think it secures her temporarily. But if you look at the Conservative Home polls, they did one on the 30% that voted for Kemi, and now the majority don't think that she will be the person leading in the next general election.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing to take into account is that you've still got a party full of one-nationers that believe in the ECHR, that believe in net zero or for the woke ideology. And I don't believe these policies that she's putting forward now, she will get through, because they're behaving at the moment because she's a new leader and they're keeping the party discipline. But when it comes to actually things like this, I think we will go back to the usual infighting and they will eat themselves alive, as they always have done.
I also think that even, the ECHR thing, OK, she might be genuine on that. If Kemi Badenoch stood up and said, no, under my regime, under my government, I should say, no one's going to go to jail for something they wrote on Twitter. I know you can't say that out loud because somebody could then go and write, let's go and kill George at number 53, see you at 6 o'clock with your axe. That would be terrible, and maybe you should go to jail for that. But generally speaking, if she were to say that, Jackie, I don't think it sounds quite... I don't know if people would believe her. If Nigel Farage said that, people would believe him, right?
Yeah,
and there's the difference. It's whether you've got that extra sense of, I don't know if credibility is even the right word on this, but whether people buy into you.
14 years of Conservatives, and it is the Conservative Party that moved away from small c conservatism, and that's where the trust has been lost, and that's why Reform is doing so well.
Yeah, you're right, Jackie. Thank you very much indeed for that. It is I think Reform, it's that common sense thing. There are huge critics of Reform who pick it all apart and say, when you look, what you're dealing with is essentially one man with a big personality and an incredible gift for public speaking, Nigel Farage, and a very rigid policy on immigration. Beyond that, it's very hard to kind of find stuff. Now, defenders of Reform are going, actually, no, there's quite a lot there if you bother to look. There is a manifesto and there's many other things you can examine. People will decide for themselves. But I think it's more than that. I think it's a feeling. And we're often warned against, voting on feelings rather than facts. But it's that sense that the country's lost its mind. I'll never stop saying that because I think we all feel it. Anyone who's bothering to open their eyes and their ears can feel that sense of like, it's a bit mad out there. At what point are we getting a Supreme Court to rule on whether a person with a willy can describe themselves as a woman? I mean, that's the kind of mass... But we're spending time and money on this garbage and institutions buying into it and all manner of other strange capers going on. 0344 499 1000. Can the Tories survive after the generic thing yesterday? It's just the latest catalyst. Interesting to know whether you think they can. Surprisingly, And can they survive before the next election? And also this, it is that time to find out how you could be with a chance of winning a trip of a lifetime. This is an absolute belter. Talk are giving away this incredible trip. We're talking trip of a lifetime, San Francisco. You get the flights, a 3-night stay at a 4-star intercontinental hotel, £2,500 spending money, plus we'll throw in tickets to the Super Bowl as well. It's an absolute peach of a prize, could be yours. Have a listen to this to find out how you can enter.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343-418-7260. Lines close 22nd January 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at TalkSport.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
We no longer have a prime minister in any sort of normal sense of the word. We have a spectre. Keir Starmer. He has no plan. He has no strategy.
Are you surprised at how bad it's gone?
I genuinely struggle to align the Keir Starmer we are seeing as prime minister with the Keir Starmer who was leader of the opposition.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very quickly, we've got a brand new voice of doom. We're looking forward to this. Yesterday, Sarah Tether was the answer. It went on for 14 days. Sarah Tether, former Liberal Democrat and minister in the coalition. Today we've got a brand new one. I haven't heard this myself either. I've no idea who this is. Remember, it's the mystery voice, and your only, what's the word, requirement? Is that your only thing you've got to do is tell us who you think this is.
We're responding to that.
Let's hear it again.
We're responding to that.
Right. Do I know? I'm not sure. Remember, it's a politician you're looking for. Young, old, left, right, dead or alive. Who is this?
We're responding to that.
87222 if you think you know. And if we get a right answer, we'll tell you after the news. Now, let's move on. We are, of course, talking about the comings and goings of the Conservative Party. Matthew Goodwin-Freeman is a Conservative councillor for Hatch End. Matthew, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Ian. How are you?
Oh, good. Nice to see you again. I mean, this is your party. It's up and down. They're in and out. Is it a sinking ship? Is there room for improvement? Are they done and dusted? What's your assessment of the Tories? Can they survive?
Well, to quote your voice of doom, if I'm responding to that, crikey, what a 24 hours. That was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It reminded me very much of the day that general election got called, when no one was expecting it. Then suddenly there were rumours and bam, you know, it was full on into the election. I mean, that was a whirlwind day.
Yeah.
Didn't expect that at all. Yes, there's room for improvement in the Conservative Party, and I think that's what people have been crying out for, and we've been starting to see since party conference last year. But clearly for Rob Jenrick, enough was enough. It was time to change colours from dark blue to turquoise blue and go join the team reform.
Well, on that point, let's have a listen to what Mr. Jenrick said yesterday.
I can't, in good conscience, stick with a party that's failed so badly, that isn't sorry, that hasn't changed, that I know in my heart can't deliver what's needed.
He just couldn't make it work, Matthew.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The Conservative Party is more than one person. It's an entire machine. It's an entire opposition. What we need to see is the Conservatives starting to roll out policies like we saw at conference, starting to say this is what a Conservative government would do if we got the chance to be in government again. I agree with a lot of what Robert Jenrick has said, though. I think this is a big loss for the Conservative Party. I find it disappointing to see colleagues going out and almost a character assassinating him, because he was one of our frontline communicators, one of our best orators, one of our most influential MPs when it comes to people the members wanted to see, and now being given free rein in reform. I think this is going to be a defection that's going to come back to bite us, really.
What have the Tories got to do now, though? Because there is that problem in politics. Perception often becomes reality, even if that is unfair. But there is a perception that the Conservative Party are more than they're beyond licking their wounds. For some people, they're a party that is no longer worth voting for. Many of those people have gone to reform. They look like the bright new option, the new kids on the block. They're full of ideas. They haven't got any previous that anyone can point to, which is a fairly luxurious place to be when you're in politics, of course. So it's difficult, isn't it? Can it be in any way? Can that perception be changed around? What has Kemi Badenoch got to do? Or does it even involve Kemi Badenoch?
Well, I'm in mourning at the loss of Robert Jenrick. He is a fantastic orator. I think he's one of our best MPs, and him going, I think people are going to live to regret. The Conservative Party has got to start doing what Reform is doing, saying what they would do, giving a vision for the country, not apologising anymore for the things of the past, and actually getting out there on our own 2 feet. That's what Rob Jenrick was doing. He was the one who did videos about fare dodging. That got TfL and London Underground to start clamping down on fare dodgers. He's the one who went to the car boot sales and challenged those people with stolen goods. He was setting the narrative, the tone, the agenda. That's what Kemi and the team have got to do. And the question is only going to rise. She's made this bold decision. She's shown a strong leadership by getting rid of her closest threat, effectively. Now she's got to stand on her own 2 feet, continue these performances at PMQs, come up with her manifesto now for the Conservative Party. Because if that doesn't come soon, the question's going to be, well, hold on, you got rid of your biggest threat, but was one of our greatest communicators, and it was all for nothing.
All for nothing, yeah. Well, there's the thing. She's got to now kind of regroup in some sort of way. There are some people who are maybe generously, Matthew, saying, well, if she does this right and she's surrounded by the right people, makes all the right noises, she had a good tail end to 2025. If she can keep that pressure up, she's got to take some Labour scalps on the way. She's got to own certain narratives. But if she can do that, and there's people like Nick Timothy, I think is a big character and may do very well for her. If she can bring James Cleverly into the fold, not sure if that's going to work, but people like that, the sort of bigger names. I can almost see the image of her Cleverly, Timothy, you know, the three of them sitting there on a poster that could look as if they not only mean business, but they've got experience of doing the job.
Yes, and one of the things Kemi's been saying is she's got a team, whereas Reform is only one person. But Reform isn't one person anymore. It's 6 people, and that number is only going to go up. I really worry if the Conservative Party don't start saying what a Conservative ballot would look like and start saying reasons to vote for the Conservatives, because Reform are coming up with it left, right and centre, coming up with policies, coming up with ideas, even if they can't be delivered immediately, setting a vision for where Britain's got to go. And we as the Conservatives, and it's one of the things I have said long before, and something that Jenrick was doing, we've got to stop apologising, start saying reasons to vote for the Conservatives. And if we don't do that, then I'm sorry, there is a new kid on the block and they are willing to do that.
Yeah. Are you wavering, Matthew? Am I sensing that you are considering a hop over the fence?
I've always been clear about the Conservative Party, what they've got to do, what they need to be. My track record is someone who's delivered victories and bucks the trend. I'll always say it as it is, and I don't care what colour that's for.
Got it. Matthew, thank you for your time. Matthew Goodwin Freeman. He is a Conservative councillor himself for Hatch End. Interesting when you speak to, I mean, there's a second Conservative councillor we've spoken to, but acknowledging that, I think fair to say from Matthew, certainly acknowledging the depth of the problem and the extent of the journey of repair. That's not reinventing the wheel. I think we can all see it. It's whether people believe it can happen. And of course, the problem, and I think Jenrick might have even said this in his speech yesterday, is that the very thing that is bothering people greatly involved all the faces that we're discussing here. Badenoch was there. Cleverly was there. He was the Home Secretary and the Foreign Secretary in the last administration. We're hearing some news from the West Midlands. And I would imagine this is probably true. This is being reported by The Guardian. They are still going, but I think they've probably called this one correctly. Craig Guilford, he is the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, or was. They're reporting that he's set to retire. His departure comes after an official inquiry found his force used exaggerated and untrue intelligence to justify a ban, of course, on fans of an Israel football team. It's interesting the word retire is being used, as if he'd been planning some obvious trip to the Costa del Sol to play golf. West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner Simon Foster will deliver a statement at 4 o'clock. We'll keep you updated. Well, we called it, right? Gone by 4. He's gone by 4. Might have been the third day, but he's gone by 4, all right? Guilford is gone. Dunlop's gone as well, and so has Ferguson. They've all disappeared. The Chief Constable, it seems, he's not stepped down, he's retired. And we'll hear from the Police and Crime Commissioner at around about 4 o'clock this afternoon. We've got a brand new voice of doom. Here's the voice.
We're responding to that.
But who is that? 87222 if you think you know. Right now, 3 o'clock. Let's get the headlines.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots to get through. It's all happening, by the way. Just gone 3 o'clock. We are responding, of course. Not dwelling too much on Robert Jenrick specifically. We know he's gone. He's now a Reform MP. I mean, should there be a... Duncan Barks was asking that a little earlier. Should there be a by-election? Probably, but there never, ever is on these things. He's not certainly alone in that respect. But where does it leave the Tories? Can the Conservative Party survive? Some argue it makes Kemi Badenoch stronger, gives her a more sound base from which to spring a range of policies and ideas, but will you believe in her? You've got to believe in her. That's the thing. It's not just the policies. You've got to believe in her that she really wants that change. Also this afternoon, as we've been hearing, the defiant West Midlands police chief, it appears, has resigned. Well, apparently the statement goes, according to The Guardian, that he's retired. Retired? That makes it sound like he planned this for years. Me and the missus, yeah, we're off to the Costa del Sol. Bit of golf. There is a press conference at 4 o'clock, and you will hear it right here on Talk. It'll be the Police and Crime Commissioner that is giving that conference. Our ministers are going to raise the age limit for which you can be an Army Reserve from 55 to 65 under new measures aimed at preparing the nation for war. Are you ready to... 65? I mean, what would you... I suppose it's a sort of a dad's army. I know everybody's making that analogy. You could do some stuff on the home front. I think war is very different these days. If somebody snips your internet cable, cuts off your lecky, and makes sure you don't get any heating, I think that's likely to be the war you might experience from the Russians. I don't know whether that matters whether you're 25, 65, 85 or 105. You'd be royally annoyed, wouldn't you, if that occurred? 0344 499 1000. We'll take calls on all of these issues. Lots to get through. Thank you to Mark in Bristol. Mark from Bristol says, here, my brother George lives at number 53. Is there something he should be worried about? I say it's a sort of a go-to name, a number. And I think the other day it was Alf at 76. We're talking about when people post things on social media. What constitutes a crime? Because we can no longer, by the way, I think we all agree on this. We argue about Grok and bikini snaps and Connolly writing, stuff she regrets writing, various other characters that have found themselves on the inside of a prison cell for what they've written. But is there a limit? I mean, some people are evangelists on this. You should be able to write anything. Really, it's only social media. I think the word only in social media has long gone. That is redundant. Sticking it on social media is now like sticking it on a billboard in the town centre. So maybe that is the new rule of thumb. Does it pass the billboard test? Would you get nicked if you wrote something on a billboard? Would you go to jail if you wrote it on a billboard? Or maybe shouted it on a megaphone in the high street? We can no longer look at social media and say, well, it's just a bit of a pastime for a few people who love a row. It's kind of more than that these days. When politicians make strategic announcements, often exclusively on social media, you have to say the goalposts have moved. But do we send people to jail for writing stuff that's a bit off? The answer is, well, no. Nobody should be going to the chiller for a view, even if it's a view that you find distasteful. That's a whole other matter. But where's the line? Because everyone draws that line in different places. Now, the Venezuelan opposition leader visited the White House yesterday. She already has the Nobel Peace Prize, by the way. She had the medal. And she presented it to Donald Trump as she attempted to woo the US president. Let's have a listen to what Maria Corina Machado had to say.
Did you offer to President Trump your Nobel Peace Prize?
I presented the President of the United States the medal of the Nobel Peace Prize.
There it is. Was it symbolic? Does he keep it? Let's speak to Jennifer Ewing, spokesperson for Republicans overseas. Jennifer, nice to have you with us. I assume this was a kind of symbolic gesture.
I think so, and I don't think she left $1 million that came along with the prize.
Yeah, that would have been something. Not that he needs it, but yeah, you're right.
Exactly. I think she just left the medal. And, A+ to Machado for her gift-giving skills. She clearly understands President Trump and what will flatter him. So, whether this was done as a thank you, because you'll recall the U.S. Special Operations did help her escape from Venezuela before Maduro was captured, or it's more of a lobbying effort because while Venezuela has kept in the former vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, in the position of president, I think Machado still very much wants to be looked at for that role. Yeah. And of course, President Trump has said she doesn't really have the buy-in from the Venezuelan people. She's not ready for that. So let's see if this changes his mind in any way.
Yeah, I was going to say this would require elections at some point, and Mr. Trump, as I understand it, has said that there can't be elections just yet. Is that right?
That is correct. That is what he's said. So, and right, there of course has to be elections. Now, keep in mind that President Trump ran on, back when he was running for office in 2024, on no more regime changes, right? We're not going into these forever wars. So you could almost call what he's been getting involved with, not just in Venezuela, but other places, regime transition. Sure. So he has to be very careful because he does not have the mandate from the America First movement, from probably anybody under the age of 40, to continue regime changes around the world.
This is very true. And of course, that has been a criticism that some Republicans have raised, not just Marjorie, who you can't keep her happy for love nor money these days, it seems. But there is certainly concern that, whether these affairs, Venezuela, Iran, Greenland, is this the narrative that Donald Trump had previously talked about? It does seem to many to be a bit of a departure.
You're completely right, Ian. And we saw, a few months ago, there were some off-year midterm, not the midterms, but some pretty important elections. And the Democrats did very, very well. The Republicans did not do very well. Post-polling shows that one of the biggest criticisms amongst people, both independents, which are the biggest group in the U.S. right now, Republicans and Democrats, was that he's concentrating on too many foreign policy issues. People want him concentrating on the domestic issues. Now, he has done a great job closing the border. Even the Democrats will admit that. But there's still a long way to go. I mean, affordability gets talked about all the time. So, while those of us who are political junkies are interested in Venezuela and Iran and Greenland, for the average American who's just trying to, go about their daily life, that quite frankly, they don't care and they don't want to hear as much about this. So, yeah, he needs to pivot for sure. But old habits die hard. You've got, what I think everybody would openly call a military-industrial complex in the United States. A lot of senators and congresspeople that have a very large vested interest in wars around the world continuing. It's quite profitable, as disgusting as that might seem. So he's being pulled in a lot of different directions, even within the Republican Party.
Sure. On that point of foreign affairs and how it affects the world and America, what is your assessment, Jennifer, on Iran at the moment? Because this one, and again, it's a confused picture coming out of Iran because they've cut everything off, so we can't really get the full picture. I'm sure various countries are flying drones over to get gather up more intelligence. Mr. Trump appeared ready to kind of intervene in some way. We're coming to help you, or words to that effect. But the protests appear to have died down a bit, or that's certainly according to what we're hearing from Mr. Trump via, one assumes, people in Iran. It's hard to believe that, though, because there are many people out there saying, no, they're still going on. You're just not seeing them. What are you making of this?
Yeah, and I'm glad you alluded to it, confusion, because I think too many people are trying to make this very, very black and white. And when you ask, a lot of Iranian people, they will say there is no easy answer. Exiled opposition is not completely united. You've got the monarchists, of course, who would like Pahlavi, and a lot of Americans have gotten behind that wing, and then there's the MEK, which is another faction. Other people in America have gotten behind that. And then, of course, as we just said, there is a whole group of Americans who are like, this is not our issue to be involved in. What I understand happened the other night is that Trump said, okay, is there an actual target that you can give me so I can do something very calculated and surgical to help the people out? And, you know, whether it was his military or his intelligence on the ground, there was not a target. So he did not want to just do reckless bombing. That doesn't help anybody, most of all the protesters, right? Because I think the Iranian people need to, they need to find their own new leader for themselves. Yeah. And it's not going to help if people are like, oh, this is an American puppet, this is an Israel puppet. Sure. So it's a tricky situation. And, you know, once again, it seems like Trump is being pulled in a bunch of different directions for people with their own agenda that has nothing to do with the Iranian people, quite frankly.
Indeed. Well, that one's not going to go away, of course, and I'm sure we'll speak again on this issue. Jennifer, thank you for your time. Jennifer Ewing, spokesperson for Republicans overseas. The Iran thing is confusing, and part of me thinks it's disappointing, but that Trump hasn't kind of somehow managed to be able to come up with something more definitive. That said, the thought of America dropping a bunch of bombs on the Ayatollah's house doesn't fill me with great joy. The implications of that, of course, are absolutely huge, not just for the region, but, of course, for the wider world too. However, if you are, and we've spoken to three really animated voices from Iran over the last week who are desperate for Trump to get in there and do something and get this regime overturned. But it's tricky. 0344 499 1000. Gary in Bolton says, what have the leaders of Britain, France and Germany got in common? All their leaders are failing. So they will manufacture a conflict with Russia to avoid elections. I mean, that would be something if they literally cancelled elections. Oh, no, they sort of have done, haven't they? Andy says, gone by four but retired. No, this is the police chief, of course, but no doubt keeping his gold-plated pension despite blatantly lying to the public and the government. And the police/government want our trust. It is that word. He's announcing his retirement. How would that even play a part in this story? I wouldn't even allow him to say the word retirement or put it in a press statement. And we're going to hear from the Police and Crime Commissioner about 4 o'clock this afternoon, who will outline, no doubt, you know, what the Chief Constable's successes were, why he was amazing, but he's decided to retire. No, he was essentially fired by the Home Secretary, but she just couldn't legally fire him. So she just said, I have no confidence in this man, which left the Police and Crime Commissioner no choice. So they've gone down this, no, I didn't fire him, she didn't fire him, nobody fired him. In fact, he decided to retire. I mean, big coincidence, wouldn't it? If his retirement has got nothing to do with recent events and he was going to... I mean, really? Are we stupid? Charlie is in East Sussex. Back to the Tories, Charlie. What do you think? Afternoon.
Oh, my good afternoon, Ian. There's so many topics to talk about, aren't there? Yes. But I just want to talk about the Tories and this Jenrick thing. Look, I've been a lifelong Tory voter. Down where we are, You've got either Lib Dems or Tory. Nothing else will get in. But unfortunately now what we've got is Liberal Democrat, lunatic, and some Greens locally, even more mad. But in terms of the Conservative Party, I think yesterday everyone's saying, oh, Kemi Badenoch, I mean, I like Kemi. But everyone's saying, oh, she's played a blinder. It's great. No, what it was, and let's get this 100% straight. What it was someone grasped Robert Jenrick up, and so she thought, right, I better do something about it now.
Yeah, she had no choice, right? I mean, she didn't come to an amazing decision of political brilliance. She didn't have a choice.
So it was someone, dropping Jenrick in it. Now, do I like the way he's done it? No. Mm-hmm. Do I like what he said afterwards? No, I don't like that. Nigel Farage was obviously caught on the hop with it. When they were talking to Richard Tice, he was obviously staying tight-lipped. We know that they've spoken to him. But from my point of view, when you look at the Conservative Party, I honestly feel that it is a busted flush because they're not the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago you had Ken Clarke on there, and there's still loads of people in the Conservative Party that are like Ken Clarke. Europhiles must do this, and this is the whole problem with them. And when you're looking at people like me who are right of centre, we're saying to ourselves, well, actually, we can't vote for the Conservatives because they're not giving us what we want, and they haven't given us what we want.
Sure.
Even though we were promised, and this whole thing sort of cut in with Cameron, in my opinion, because he basically didn't do what he said he was going to do, and that is the problem with the Conservatives. So for someone like myself, I am now forced to vote for reform, because at least they're going to do what they say they're going to do. It's written on the tin, and that's what they're going to do. Now, Jenrick, he's a very clever chap, and so he's looked at the writing on the wall. He's seen Kemi's becoming more popular. She's getting more established, and he's thinking to himself, well, actually, I'm not going to get anywhere here. What can I do? He's done it. I think is appalling, but
can she, just in a word, Charlie, can the Tories come back, and can they come back with Badenoch? When I say come back, I mean to make an impact and succeed.
I don't believe so, and that is the worrying thing, which I told your researcher, because it what we can't have is 5 more years of this absolute lunatic left-wing government, and God forbid Ed Miliband gets any close to the leadership. That would just do it, really, wouldn't it?
Yeah, these people believe they're on the right side of God, of course. So that's the
they do, and I wouldn't even talk about religion. But it's, to be honest with you, Ian, the Conservatives, they really have to. She says she's getting rid of the dead wood. I don't think that was a great statement to make, but at the end of the day, they haven't done what they're supposed to be doing as Conservatives. That's all I wanted to say, really.
Fair point, Charlie. Thank you very much indeed. I always thought Kemi Badenoch was a great operator as a cabinet minister. She did. I keep talking about this common sense thing. She was one of the sort of few Tories that did seem to be tapping at that particular door when it came to the common sense point. And that's, I think, why her star rose, because she was young. The fact that she wasn't, the archetypal Tory that people think of, middle-aged white bloke. She's educated, she's got a brain, she's got a whole backstory that kind of, in conservative terms, would be encouraged. She's a black female, not a white male. There's all of those elements. And it shouldn't be about colour, and it shouldn't be about gender, but it does kind of play a part in perceptions. And of course, she was seen as somebody who also shot from the hip. She was really good, and she said stuff like, I don't buy into this kind of nonsense. I'm not here, the idea that I'm going to define myself by my colour or my gender, it just ain't going to happen. And she's that person. It's not what everybody believes, but that's who she was, which does feed into that common sense agenda that, there's a big thirst for out there. That said, she was still part of the last government, and that's very, very hard to in any way kind of change or dress up. 0344 499 1000. The Voice of Doom. The Voice of Doom. Have we got a winner? Day one on the brand new Voice of Doom. This is the voice that we played you before the news.
We're responding to that.
Just on that last word, I think I know who, because I don't know who this is, brother. Can you hear it again, Amy?
We're responding to that.
I think it might be. I think it's Winston Churchill. Pretty sure it's Churchill. I've just been told I haven't got it right. These are some of the guesses, however. Has anybody got it right? We've got Katie Lamb, Dominic Raab, Katie Lamb, Peter Carr, Stephen Kinnock, Jeremy Hunt, Mike Tapp, Mark Harper, Robert Jenrick, Alex Chalk, Grant Shapps, Ben Wallace, Richard Tice. None of those are correct. In fact, we haven't got a winner. It rolls over to Monday for day 2. 20 past 3 now. This is Talk.
We no longer have a prime minister in any sort of normal sense of the word. We have a spectre. Keir Starmer. He has no plan. He has no strategy.
Are you surprised at how bad it's gone?
I I genuinely struggle to align the Keir Starmer we are seeing as prime minister with the Keir Starmer who was leader of the opposition.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. A little bit of breaking news concerning Iran. Reza Pahlavi, who's the son of the last Shah of Iran. He's 65. He has been a prominent voice, of course, calling for the protest to continue in the country. He's currently speaking in Washington. He has said that he will return to Iran and that the Islamic Republic will fail. Now, this is interesting, and he's making a big speech, and of course there are lots of people on the streets mobilised. We've had the voices on air saying this man must be in place to take Iran back to what it was and what it should be. It should be a moderate, secular country. 40% of Iranians are not practicing Muslims, so it's already evidence there that this is not, it's not Saudi Arabia in that sense. But there is, of course, still some disquiet about people who go, hang on a second, pre-1979, when the old Shah was knocking around, I mean, there were some pretty bad things went on then as well. So I don't know. It seems that in terms of which side you would come down on, unequivocally would be the side of Mr. Pahlavi, who's speaking now. That seems to be where the smart money is. But can it happen? Will it happen? And when will it happen? We'll follow that story as we hear more. Let's go back to your calls. Matt is in Cheshire. We're discussing the fate of the Tories and the like. Matt, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Very good afternoon, Ian. Can I just say, you made me laugh out loud before when you said, I bet I'm older than that police constable guy. I'm also older than him, and it's made my day. I actually feel and look fantastic compared to him.
Yeah, he's going to have a terrible weekend. And I'm not saying I don't wish that on anybody, but I would imagine this is a bloke that was. I mean, maybe he was thinking of retirement in the next. I don't know what the deal is. A top job in the police. Do you get to retire at 55? Maybe, possibly. Maybe when you're at his level. Maybe he was thinking that. I'm pretty sure he wasn't intending to retire on Friday, January the 16th.
He's going to look worse in a couple of weeks than he does now, isn't he? So,
yeah.
On this question of the day, if you had a friend that continually lets you down, fails you, and betrays you, do you continue to forgive them, or do you just boot them out for good? In my view, forgiveness is for fools if the other party are not contrite.
Yeah.
And as Robert Jenrick said, the Conservatives are not contrite. They're past masters at sucking you back in and making you believe they're drivel all over again, and then they do exactly the same thing. 300 years of experience in doing that. So,
what was their biggest crime? Because much in the same way as Ed Miliband's cost of living crisis mantra from 2010 onwards took hold, and then now everybody just says it at any chance. The Tories' 14 years of failure is another one that's taken hold. But what do we point to in particular?
Number one, immigration.
Yep.
Number two, saying sound money and then blowing it all in about a month during COVID. And when they had plenty of time to sort of say, actually, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
Do we need a second lockdown? There's evidence there that they could have looked at, but they'd already decided to go hell for leather into blowing money all over the place.
Sure.
Labour egged them on in doing that, knowing they would benefit in doing it as well. And just general infrastructure and things like that.
And do you know, the immigration thing, I am convinced that because people like Boris Johnson and David Cameron, and in this respect they're cut from the same cloth, they are of the belief that, you know, you need a load of immigration to keep things going, and people will moan, and people will have, you know, there'll be phases where they moan more than other times, and there'll be other phases when, you know, it calms down. And I reckon they're the guys that, you know, the permanent secretaries in the Home Office and in the Foreign Office probably take them to one side and said, right, Prime Minister, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get a load of crap for this. You're going to be, you know, widely criticised in the but don't worry, it'll blow over. It always does. And I reckon that's how they governed, thinking that it sounds like a big problem. When I go on TV, I'll acknowledge that it's a big problem, but it'll be fine and it'll go away. And I think they believed that.
I think you're probably right, Ian. I think the civil service and the Tory establishment have been so used to, again, sucking people back in, conning them time and time again. That basically, we can do anything.
Yeah.
But what they didn't see on the horizon was reform. And I don't think, I'm going to say the oracle and probably one of the best minds of our generation, Peter Hitchin, if England and Britain is ever to have a future, the Tories need to die first, and then Labour need to die after them.
Got it. On that point, Matt, thank you very much indeed. Great to have you with us. Matt in Cheshire. David says, I wonder if Craig Ferguson, you had to be listening to the show. Sometimes I read out a message that's only relevant if you've been listening to the whole thing, OK? But I'm going to do it anyway because it's good. David says, I wonder if Craig Ferguson or Craig Dunlop will be taken over when Craig Guilford steps down out of the office and onto the golf course with his fat wallet stuffed with his final salary pension, says David. I've added the anger in there as well. Any Craig, I mean, Craig Fairbrass as well. Craig Fairbrass. Is he the fella from Right Said Fred? Or was that Craig Fairbrass is the guy that was in EastEnders, isn't he? He's the I had a chat with him once in a high street in Bromley. I'm sure I did. He was in EastEnders. That's Craig Fairbrass. Richard Fairbrass, I think he's the bloke from Right Said Fred. So, hang on, let's get this right. Right Said Fred are taking over as the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police. This is turning into be an incredible story. I'm too sexy for my patch. Doesn't sound quite right, does it? 0344 499 1000. More to come from you. That press conference with the Police and Crime Commissioner of the West Midlands happening around about 4 o'clock. They're always a couple of minutes late, but you'll hear it here on Talk. So details on that. It'll shine some light on the Chief Constable who's announced he's not been fired. He's not even leaving conventionally. He's retiring. You allowed him to say, I'm retiring. Yeah, I was going to retire anyway, right? So what of it? That seems to be what he's saying. Details to come and more comment from you on the way. It's 3:30.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Craig... God, I've got to get it right now. I nearly did it again. Craig Guilford. Not Craig Ferguson. Or Craig Dunlop, or Craig David even. It could be Craig David, because he was going to retire on a Wednesday. Then he could go on, couldn't it? That would have worked, but we should have started with that one, shouldn't we? Nor is it Craig Charles, the actor and comedian. Craig Guilford has stepped down as Chief Constable, but he's saying he's retiring. Full press conference coming at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Now, retired troops in their 60s could be called up to rejoin the military under new powers aimed at making it easier to mobilise tens of thousands of veterans. For what purpose would the government need them? Let's speak with Major General Chip Chapman, Senior British Military Advisor. Chip, good to have you on as ever. Nice to see you again. What are we making of this? I mean, obviously the phrase Dad's Army kind of writes itself on this one, doesn't it? But is it that, or is there something else going on here?
Well, I think it is the sort of Dad's Army vision that you have, but there is something else. And it really comes from this is the military implementation of the political direction which was set out in the National Security Strategy of June 2025. And what that really said is that the UK must prepare for a wartime scenario in the UK mainland. So what this really does is give you the age and legal basis. What it doesn't do is give you the tasks or how they will be trained, and often there's an air gap between recommendations and implementation. Yeah. But in terms of all this being a whole of nation endeavour for the future, and resilience is the word they keep using, then of course it makes sense, and it picks up on some of the things that the Chief of Defence Staff said from the military perspective in his RUSI annual lecture at Christmas 2025.
So this isn't. We're not going to see octogenarians parachuting out of planes into foreign lands. It won't be that. But simultaneously, it might not be Home Guard set up either. I mean, we could have people in slightly more significant roles. I mean, you can be a very fit 65-year-old.
Yeah, I doubt it. Again, there was some talk earlier in or later in 2025 about the sort of tasks that they might do. And there was, in the 80s, at the height of the Cold War, there used to be a thing called the Home Service Force, which were those who were ex-regulars, possibly what is Tier 3 now, that's the regular reserve, who would do things like guarding of critical national infrastructure and making sure that those aspects of a whole of a society approach to war were secured. And it's really that security of everything. It's not just the fact that the military is sort of the first pillar of security. It's the fact that your energy, your critical national infrastructure, all those things, your water supplies, your critical supply chains, they are all absolutely valid, because one or two things that we've discovered really since the Russia-Ukraine war is armies don't fight wars, nations fight wars. And secondly, that wars may be long, they may not be short. That was a sort of paradigm we got into in the post-45 period. It may no longer be valid, as it's not been valid for Russia's endeavours in Ukraine.
Indeed. It may not be tanks on your high street, but having your internet and your heating cut off could be more the kind of terrain we find ourselves in. And how likely do you sense, Chip, that we are in almost a new Cold War? Because it does... Not to exaggerate things, there is a sense, I don't think that's a completely misplaced analysis, that some are advancing.
Well, the thing is, during the Cold War, that it never got to a hot war, and that's always a good thing. So we're still living in the period of long peace since 1945 in Western Europe. And the longer we can preserve that, the better. So there's two real ways you do that. The first one is by deterrence. By making sure that the risk calculus for the Russians is larger than it would be, to give them a sense of uncertainty should they do anything. But the difference between the Cold War is we are still in this hybrid warfare scenario where, with an open society and with the internet and social media, it is easy to sort of break apart a society. That is one of the objectives of the Russians, along with these sort of attacks that they use not by proxy forces as they would use in the Cold War, i.e. use Cuban troops or whatever, but by using serious organised crime gangs, for example. And often if you use those, they won't even be sure that they were tasked by Russian military assets such as the GRU. And of course, those were the guys who did the nerve agent attack in Salisbury on the Skripals, also did the attack on Litvinenko, the first time a radiological attack happened in Western Europe since the Second World War.
Indeed. Chip, great to have you on. Always very thorough stuff. Great to speak as ever. Major General Chip Chapman with us on the programme. He is, of course, senior military advisor, an incredible, glowing career in military terms. Thank you to him. Lots still to come. We are waiting the the Police and Crime Commissioner of the West Midlands, who's going to be speaking at 4 o'clock and shining some light. This is Simon Foster, by the way, shining some light because the Chief Constable, Craig Guilford, has stepped down from the role. He's retiring to spend more time with his money, or his golf clubs, or his wife, or I don't know. He's not leaving because of anything that happened. Did nothing wrong, by the way. He's retiring. It's a nice, happy coincidence. All of this nonsense went on, and it happened to chime when Craig is retiring. What's the chances of that? But there it is. We wish him luck in his new retirement. He'll be out buying his trunks tomorrow morning. I'm sure British Home Stores is still open over there at the Bullring. He can go in and buy himself a couple of pairs and be off on a flight by about 2 o'clock. But we'll get the details of this from the Police and Crime Commissioner at 4 o'clock. Back to your calls. Michael's in Birmingham. Michael, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Yeah, afternoon. I think Mr. Dunlop will... and by the way, that Dunlop... Kevin, I don't think Kevin's going entirely mad. That name rings a bell with me somewhere. I'm thinking 80s, 90s, 70s sports person, golf or motorcycling.
Really?
Anyway,
OK.
I digress. I can sort of see where Kev got it from. Yeah, I don't think we'll be as rid of him. I wouldn't be surprised if some sort of consultancy role in this area came up. But what I was going to say is sure. your contributor earlier mentioned the point about this general area, the West Mids, going to some sort of special measures. And I completely support that, because one of the overwhelming things which this police fiasco has kind of like blown a lid over. If you live here, and a lot of people say, you get the feeling something's going on. There's just something going on.
Does it feel like that? Because this is your neck of the woods. When you say something's going on, what is it? Can you expand on that a little bit, Michael?
Yeah, kind of Minnesota stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah,
that's interesting.
And that's been said for a long time before Minnesota appeared.
Sure.
You know, going back to the council, you know, people were aware of some very sketchy and expensive contracts that were being let in spurious ways. I can't say too much of that, but you get what I mean. You think something's going on, and you know, it's not just me being a conspiracy theorist. A few of us other conspiracy theorists around here kind of like said, yeah, there's just something not right. And I've noticed that more in the last few years. I don't know why. I can't articulate it. The only thing I'll say is, you know, a few years ago there was talk about barbershops across the country. Yeah. Driving schools are suddenly popping up here. And you just think that there always seems to be something behind it.
Yeah.
And this police thing, you know, it gets worse and worse and worse because it wasn't just about the ropey decision, and I don't believe AI. I think the AI thing is retrofitting. I mean, because there would be records on the computer of that, you feel, you know, there's more going on. You know, there was some sort of grant that was mentioned, and relationships with, you know, communities on appointment and all of that. And I just feel that we'll get more of the same, by the way, probably even worse in terms of his replacement. But that's what I was going to say. That I got a feeling this is the UK's Minnesota, and it won't be exposed under this government, but maybe reform will, if they get.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, and there's so many parts to this. Isn't it funny? This started out with a football match.
Yeah, it is.
And yet here we are. It's fine. Like if it was a Netflix program, I always keep alluding to if it was a Netflix program, but it's the go-to kind of example. It started out with a story about a football match, and here we are now talking about a very senior officer having to retire. And you're just introducing a few themes as well, which in fairness to you, Michael, I've heard other people also raise some of those concerns. Bizarre community relations where an awful lot of weight is put onto one area of the community, some saying it's even a religious thing. Goodness me. Michael, I've got to move, but thank you. It's a great call. That is Michael in Birmingham. It's his patch. This one from Reg. The reason why the Chief Constable has not resigned, well, he has now, is that he's waiting for his local community leaders to tell him that he can. Well, that's how it kind of feels. I think that's rather what sort of Michael is kind of alluding to. Heather says, Reform UK have never been in government. Don't be stupid. You've got to give them a chance to prove themselves and prove to us. Then you know if they are good at doing the job of running the country. And thinking about it, have we ever, in my lifetime, we've never voted in a government that has never been a government before, that has never actively run the government before. That's never happened. Obviously, at some point in every political party's journey, that would have happened when the Tories back in 1834 or whatever it was kicked off their party, although elections were fairly suspicious affairs back then. Yeah, but Reform have never run anything, which is both to their credit, both to their advantage, I should say, but also potentially to their detriment. You know, not unreasonably, I think it's fair, and I think they know this, that you would say, are they, you know, will they be able to do this? Have they got the numbers? Have they got the right people? Clearly the right policies, etc. So it's a heck of a gamble from the British public in that sense, if nothing else. 0344 499 1000. We're going to be back with more of your calls in a couple of moments. Before we do, let's find out how you could be able the chance to win trip of a lifetime. We are talking San Francisco, beautiful city, giving away the flights. You get the flights, you get a 3-night stay. We're talking 4-star Intercontinental Hotel, £2,500 spending money plus tickets to the Super Bowl. It's an absolute touch of a prize, believe me. Let's find out how you can enter.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343-418-7260. Lines close 22nd January 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at TalkSport.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
I was sat in the tent and he was showing me through photos of his phone, scrolling through. This was barbaric, horrific stuff. Blokes going through walls in vehicles and then jumping out and shooting everyone. You know, his WhatsApp picture was him with a mask on, with a gun like that.
You're in a tent with this guy?
I'm in a tent with this guy, and actually he's just showing me this stuff. I'm just thinking, this is not the kind of bloke you want to be coming to the UK.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Winston, who says the Conservatives haven't really got a clue how the country feels about the last time they were in power. The majority of people are not forgetting. But it's only the more you talk about it, you are forced reasonably to ask the question, well, which bit is it? Because up to we had the coalition thing, then we had the Brexit vote. 2016 to 2020, I don't think the vibe of, unless you're a lefty, I don't think the vibe of, you know, it's been 10 years of hell was out there at that point. People would have had their disagreements. Immigration was always a discussion, but never to the extent that it is right now. So what would you mark out in terms of the specific reason why the Tories are done? Unless you think otherwise. Matthew's in Warrington. What do you make of it, Matthew? Afternoon.
Good afternoon, mate.
Hiya.
I think the Tories will end up like the Lib Dems, to be a fringe party, because they've lost their way, and they've lost their way since the last 20 years, and that's why reform. If they get everything right, if they get the right people in place, you get the their politics correct,
Yep.
I can see them being the major party for the next 20, 30 years. I think Labour, they've performed so badly that there'll be a generation of people that won't vote Labour. So I think I can see the political outline for the next 20 years where you've got one main white ring party, and then you're going to have loads of little fringe parties that might become, when you have hung parliaments and
that's true.
Coalitions, and then it'll just be messy politics.
But are there in that time? Because I hear exactly what you're saying, Matthew. But would Reform just become the Tory party in that time? Because one of the things that holds politicians back isn't that they don't want to do something, is that it's just a faff. Sometimes it's expensive, so let's kick that into the long grass. Immigration, we'll deal with it next year, don't worry, it'll go away. It's that kind of thinking.
But it won't go away, because at the end of the day, we've got to sort it out, because we're running out of money. The Tories started the rot, and Labour have just made it a million times worse. We are going to be bankrupt, and at some point, so if in 2029, or whatever the next general election is, if Reform get in, they're going to open the door, and it'll be like when Tories took over Labour. There'll be a little note saying, "Oops, we spent all the money."
Yeah, there's no money left,
and that's what it's going to be. And then they're going to have to go. There are going to be some very hard choices to be made. Sure. I think they will say to people, "Listen, this is the mess that we've been left."
Yeah.
And you've only got yourself to blame, because we all know when Labour Keir Starmer got voted in, I thought this isn't going to be good. This isn't going to be
this
good.
is not going to end well.
And it's not been good. What one thing has Labour done that's made it better in this country? Breakfast clubs that the schools have to pay for out of their own money. They've not. So someone else is going short on it.
They always talk about breakfast clubs. Every time there's a minister out there, they always talk about bloody breakfast clubs. I mean, great, they are, much needed and fantastic for those who are able to get that service. I get that, but it does seem to be a sort of go-to. What have you ever done for us? Well, breakfast clubs. Every single time. It's like Romans and roads, isn't it? It's the same kind of word association thing. Matthew, I hear you. Thank you very much indeed for that. Wouldn't it be interesting, though, if you had, like, Reform for the next 20, 30 years, or just running things? I do think that political parties diluting their kind of core reason for being does happen to a degree because of a complacency thing and civil servants saying, well, you could do this, but it will, be quite costly and it will be a right old faff and you'll end up doing nothing else but this. So just retain the status quo. Go on TV interviews and radio and tell people, yep, you're on it, you hear it, you get... I think we've had that for so many years that I don't know where we can go next. I don't honestly think that can wash anymore. Georgina, down in London. Georgina, what have you got for us?
Good afternoon. Well, there's been a huge seismic shift in the political party arena. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no Conservative Party anymore. They're a moribund party here. And their only saving grace has just been sacked because even he saw that the Conservative values that back in the day made the Conservative Party stand out from the rest, the party that made an English Conservative voter proud to be British, no longer exists. Yeah. You've only got to listen to them in PMQs. They're no better than a college debate team, Ian. Mm-hmm. It's embarrassing. And the most important issues, like our economic growth, immigration, net zero, the welfare bill, don't even get addressed and always seem to get kicked into the long grass. It's a lot of talk and never any action. The Conservative Party now are too worried about political correctness, virtue signalling and box ticking. They're afraid to tell the truth about the state of our country, just in case they offend someone. But to get this country back on track, people are going to have to be offended. We can't go on the way we are. It's all got out of hand. We want a party, Ian, that puts our country and our people first, a party that has pride in our flag, our heritage, and the safety of our borders and our people, a party that's true to its word, a party that wants us to have jobs, cash in our pockets, and not have to live hand to mouth, to be able to really live, not just exist. And that is not the Conservative Party.
Georgina, thank you. Lovely monologue as ever from Georgina. And Mark says, afternoon, Ian, I can't believe the police chief of the West Midlands is being allowed to retire. Should have been sacked, loss of pension and any other privileges. Disgusting. Many thanks, says Mark. I think a lot of people feeling exactly like that. We are minutes away, Peter Cardwell.
I feel exactly the same way as Mark.
Yeah.
Spineless Simon Foster, the Precinct and Crime Commissioner, who wouldn't sack Craig Guilford for what is an absolutely open and shut case of when a chief constable should be investigated and sacked. If a constable, if an inspector, if a sergeant had done this, his feet, or his or her feet, would not touch the ground.
Correct.
Instead, we have the establishment protecting itself, lying to Parliament, then not resigning, and instead going off into the sunset with his gold-plated pension. That is what Craig Guilford is going to do today. He's not even going to face the cameras. He doesn't even have the spine himself. Cowardly Craig doesn't have the spine to actually face the cameras today. He'll likely get no further questions about that. This is disgraceful.
Isn't it interesting? Because there'd have been a meeting and someone going, right, how can we dress this up?
Yeah.
You know, should we, what do we do, Chief Constable? Do we go illness? We say you're ill? No, we can't do it. It's too sick. That. You can't pretend you're ill when you're not ill. OK, what do we... Retirement. Yeah, we'll do the retirement.
He's already retired. He's already retired before. Then he came back.
Has he?
Yes, to protect his pension. He retired in 2024.
Oh, he did, didn't he?
Yes.
He's only like 50, isn't he?
Then he came back to the same job to protect his pension. These people have absolutely no shame.
Unbelievable.
And then lied to Parliament,
yeah.
And is now scuttling off into retirement. No doubt there'll be a few non-executive directorships and consultancies that he will be going to as well for even more money.
Yeah. Simon Foster is the Police and Crime Commissioner. He's going to be making that speech in a few minutes. In fact, I think we can throw to it now, and Peter will be with you after this.
The Chief Constable, Craig Guilford, has today retired from West Midlands Police with immediate effect. In doing so, he has acted with honour and in the best interests of West Midlands Police and our region. I welcome his decision. I'm pleased this outcome has been reached having regard to due process and the law. That has prevented what might otherwise have been a complex procedure that would have caused significant distraction, impact and cost to West Midlands Police and the wider West Midlands. It was important this matter was resolved in a balanced, calm, fair, measured and respectful manner. The Chief Constable's retirement follows the decision of the Birmingham City Council Safety Advisory Group, based on the recommendation of West Midlands Police, to ban away fans from attending the Europa League football match between Aston Villa and Maccabi Tel Aviv on the 6th of November 2025.